Isn't it sweet? That's our little mug. Tracy. Where is it? No, that's Dick and that is Dick Tracy. That's a side view, that's a front view. We use these terms, don't we, in this film. There's a little boy in the middle and he's not too happy. Round the other side here, we have Constable. Again, you see. It's a little police car. It's also a mug. I suppose I should show them now, should I? I love it when it's Christmas during the year. Right, the Dick Tracy film is coming soon. Now, isn't it sweet? That's our little mug. That's Dick Tracy. Where is it? No, that's Dick and that is Dick Tracy. You see, that's a side view, that's a front view. We use these terms, don't we, in this film business here. There's a little boy in the middle and he's not too happy. Round the other side here, we have a police constable. That's the same one again, you see. There, that's a little police car. It's also a mug. I suppose I should show them now, should I? I love it when it's Christmas during the year. Right, the Dick Tracy film is coming soon. Now, this is Dick. The only trouble is, you remember that marvellous thing he had with that little two-way wrist radio? Remember his little sign he used to say, what was it, two-way? Well, he hasn't got one. It's disappointing. You see, both hands are free. Actually, a bit gay there, isn't it? A bit gay. Put him there for a while. This is Prune Face. Was there such a creature, was there? Or was this just in the film? Prune Face. Working in the programming department at this place here. When the ratings are good, he looks like this. And when the ratings are bad, he looks like this. There you are. You two can be very friendly. Now, this is, I don't want to say who this person is, but he can put his own beer on his own head, which is a bit of a step forward for most of the Australians' fantasies, like that, and he growls at people. He's not with us at the moment. What a little menage a trois we have there. Look at that. Little cute things, aren't you? Itchy. Now, I'm not going to do anything with this one. Right, and finally we have, you know, a big boy, and you have to take his word for that. Right. Okay. So I'm sorry, Dick Tracy. The film is coming, and Jack Nicholson's in it, which is a bit disappointing. In fact, we've got a story on that. Should we leave? That'll do. Get him excited. Right. Glad we got that out of the way. I was looking forward to that. Good evening. This is actually a news show if you're new to Australia. And we, a little group of journalists and me, go through the news of the day. We've left out, you know, sort of common accidents because we can't be obsessed with people have accidents every day. In fact, I broke a leg that I wasn't in the news. I was in the hospital, but I wasn't in the news. Johnny Diesel tomorrow night should be coming in, and Sue Smith talking about the week. We'll play that marvellous song of Johnny Diesel. What is it? I Want Somebody to Love, from the film The Delinquents, a group of newsroom people on a holiday. And that film, in fact, is available on videotape next week. I'll be reviewing that next week. There you are. Well, overseas, they know nothing of these things. Dick Tracy or Big Boy or anything like that. Romanians are discovering that democracy isn't as easy as it looks. Just a month after their first democratic elections, Romanians are back on the streets, fighting mad and calling for the overthrow of the... What have you got? Well, the trundle of tanks is not the only cause for the rumbling in Romania. An earthquake, 4.3 on the open-ended logarithmic Richter scale, has hit the east of the country. There have been no reports as yet of casualties or damage. It's believed to be a delayed aftershock from a stronger earthquake of about 2 weeks ago. Romania's neighbours, Yugoslavia and Bulgaria, actually, will they have a railway there, will they? It'll be interesting. They'll have a police station, won't they? I don't know why we need it, but then again, I don't know everything. If I did, I wouldn't be here. Well, this so-called multi-function police is clearing the shape of things to come. Jeff Watson is a man of the future, a reporter of some vision. He knows what lies beyond. That Jeff didn't get his visa renewed for Japan. Retribution. Yes, well, that's possible what happened. I mean, doesn't matter if we sell out. It's all one world. We should all live happily ever after. At the moment, it doesn't look so good. One of the stories coming up after the break, the torture sideshow to the war in Libya. This is an amazing story. Doctors say Victoria's first liver and kidney transplant patient has a good chance of surviving the marathon operation. The operation on the 40-year-old Melbourne man began about 7 o'clock this morning and did not finish till this evening. The procedure required 2 separate incisions, with the liver being transplanted first, followed by the kidney. The operation has only been performed twice before in Australia, both times in Sydney. It's a long time. Hope they're celebrating now. Not prematurely, but just celebrating. The days when Israel could do no wrong in the eyes of America are long gone, and a new mule-head stand by Israeli Prime Minister Ch9 is not helping heal the rift. Shamir has now added another condition to any talks between his government and the Palestinians. There will be no discussions with Palestinians insisting on an independent Palestinian homeland. US Secretary of State James Baker his bundle over Shamir's hard line. Exasperated, he sent a sarcastic and most undiplomatic message. A chorus of "Don't blame me, I didn't do it, I wasn't here at the time, I was on holidays, etc., rang through the White House in Washington today after some allegations were thrown around that in 1962 the CIA, the beloved CIA, gave a tip-off to South African police that led to the arrest of Nelson Mandela, who spent some weeks in jail. George Bush, where we heard that name before, will meet Mr. Mandela later this month. And although the president has an alibi, he'll probably have the good grace to blush on behalf of the spooky outfit he used to. There's been a good film done on the CIA, a good honest one. It probably wouldn't be an American one. But oh, the things they have done to save the US. From what? Because some of them refused to behave, remember? Recently, in Central America? I don't want to know, he said. Looney Tunes. Well, sometimes going off to war must seem a fun sort of thing to do. Australians fell for that one when they volunteered in droves in 1914 to go off and fight the Hun. It seemed a bit of a lark, too, for the Liberian youngsters joining the rebel forces of Charles Taylor against President Samuel Doe. Plenty of people to shoot, plenty of guns to do it with, and plenty of loot. Very sort of, what's the word, indifferent, the way he does his little voiceover on that, isn't it? Of course, the problem is that President Samuel Doe could probably end up being just a John Doe in a grave somewhere, the irresistible and the immovable. But as the bloke indicated, it's the people who are caught in the midst, although some of them are happy to fight. It's probably true of a lot of us. Brutal stuff, though, wasn't it? It's humanity at work. Well, things will have to improve. One of these stories coming up after this break, a cat that had an ocean cruise. Well, Berlin, they tell me, looks a happier place these days. East Enders can go visiting without being shot, and a new economic accord appears to be helping a smooth transition to reunification. There's just one small blemish. With a fire on the Norwegian oil tanker in the Gulf of Mexico. It has flared again after firefighting. As you might see every night on this program, there's no shortage of war around this jolly planet. Now, I might seem a bit of a spoilsport, but it does seem indulgent for rich Americans to play wars for fun. On the other hand, I mean, if they've never flown before and they're flying very close to the ground, why don't they die a bit? I don't understand that. That's America for you. What is a poor deer to do when mum up and runs away? This fawn was found motherless in a forest in Belgium by a woodcutter who took the little critter home. There's a reenactment for you. Attempts to feed the fawn with baby bottles failed. But another little critter with its own little litter came to the rescue, the woodcutter's cat. Well, Chinese students and Cambodians might have problems being allowed to live in Australia, but not Mercedes the cat. The stowaway was found in a shipping container in Adelaide after surviving 48 days without food or water on a journey from Britain. Its only company had been a Mercedes car. The cat has been granted asylum in Australia and will be released into the custody of a caring family once it has served 9 months in quarantine as a check against babies. That was actually rabies. I'll see if you're listening. On your screen soon, a new sport from Melbourne which must be stamped out What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. I'm sorry, I distracted. I did your cue. I'm sorry. No, really, I did miss it. I don't want to be rude. I mean, it'd be awful of me to put this program first. I've always said that if you were to put to wear what we say on the commercial breaks, you'd find it more entertaining. Because our licence will be, under some suspicion everywhere. Everyone makes a fool of himself at some time or other. I've yet to. I mean, it is embarrassing, I'll be honest. I am yet to. Now, with actors, it appears to be an occupational hazard, or maybe they just don't realise they're being foolish. From Melbourne, Jane Holmes reports on a strange tray, T-R-A-I-T, tray, amongst thespians. We're just missing those ladies that got lost on that boat the other day. Remember that 3-hour documentary we had on them and how they recovered? We were just missing that just a bit there. Perhaps they could all get together there. Whatever. Still to come tonight, the splurge to promote Dick Tracy and what it's like to work with one. Cut it out. Sorry, Itchy was driving them crazy. We did miss those two, didn't we? Those two that were on the boat together. It was wonderful, isn't it?
They were thespians also.
They were thespians also. Well, one of them was, and the other one was as well. But certainly one was. They had a lovely time on the trip there. But certainly it was. We enjoyed that. In fact, the number of people that ring up and say, "Could we have copies of that?" Normally we don't, because it's not actually a duplicating station as is at this stage. Although there is a television station that could well be doing that soon. But we don't. But there'll be a lot of requests. A lot of internal ones from people saying, could we have that? And of course we'll put theatre sports on the other side of the tape. Now running through some of the main news stories of the night so far. The latest program, remember Dick Tracy's awful nose. Remember that? It was... And his unattractive sidekick. Now what was the name of his sidekick? Do we know? Go-Go Gomez? Well, we haven't got a doll of Go-Go Gomez, have we? Perhaps Itchy got to him. Or Big Boy. Anyway, I remember that too. I remember that marvellous message you might remember. That little balloon saying two-way radio. Now, of course, they're almost that size. That was a long time ago. I hadn't heard from Dick for years. He's vanished, as far as I'm concerned, without a Tracy. The whole night is justified by that, without a Tracy. It's lovely, isn't it lovely? We'll put that on the tape too, just near the end. Well, the film of the comic is now out. I'm surprised that Jack Nicholson is in it. It seems a bit soon after you-know-what. Now, if Dick Tracy is still on the side of the common man, perhaps he could set fire to the interviewer in this story. Here she is. I think we might be running to a second tape in our duplicating service, won't we? Wasn't that terrific? Wasn't she just... wasn't she just wonderful? There you are. The film should be coming out soon to a theatre near you. What's next? Is it weather or something? Is it weather? Oh, well, that's good. Spent all day today fiddling with computers, trying to make them interface, if there's such a thing as a why all the printers can't work on the one interface, I don't know. The nice people fixed my laser printer, the people of Olympia. They fixed it up while I was there. Lovely. Once you work with a laser printer, you will not work with anything else. In fact, I'm ordering a couple of laser printers to work the cameras here, a couple of blokes here. Brilliant. Have you people played with laser printers? Laser plinters. When I said laser plinters, of course, that's wrong. Which has nothing to do with anything, except that I've spent all day staring at a screen. The forecast? No, the synoptic chart. In fact, the Weather Bureau calls this the anal chart. Now, the reason they call it anal, it's short for analysis, but I think it's someone's little sense of humour back in the 40s. They loved typing out the anal. It's not on the map. That's been it. It was good seeing that story tonight. There wasn't that Liberian one, the story of what people are doing. I have not seen anything like that. It's almost like a film about it, isn't it? And we show you those things, not because we're sort of being daddy or mummy, but we show you those things so you know next time you hear about Liberia that they ain't playing games. That's the reason, no other reason. I shall be back tomorrow, which I think is towards the end of the week. Now, Sue Smith's going to come in, my old mate, and talk about her week. Johnny Diesel is going to come in, and we'll have his song. I don't think he's playing because they can't fit the band in here, can they? Unless all the crew move out, which makes it a bit difficult. We can fit one of the graphics artists in, providing they close the good eye. So that'll be tomorrow night. That's the end of the week, and I'll have a film review video, a lovely film. Lovely, if you have a hard... That's tomorrow night. Bernie Bremen was the... do you know what size saxophone was? No, it was about 2'6". Got you there, didn't I? Bernie Bremen, and that was Lucky Things. Johnny Diesel, who's sounds like a black man. He should look after his voice, though. He should, for our sake. Right. I suppose if you were born last week in Swan Hill, you might not have heard of Sue Smith. Sue Smith, a name often used by secretaries who book into outer suburban motels, first appeared at the age 14 on a television quiz. She was a model, or model, if you're in South Australia, and went to uni and did a BA, which is nowadays probably marginally better than not having a BA. Smith recovered from modelling and uni and joined television, not long after John Logie Baird's death. She was the first woman to front a national current affairs show. She did, however, hit her peak in the early 80s when she appeared on the legendary Beauty and the Beast. She still has the name Smith and is not allowed in any motels around Swan Hill. Tonight, S. Smith is here to give her opinion of this past week. You're looking very well. I know it's a sexist thing to say. You know, everyone, in America you'd be beautiful. You're still looking gorgeous, but you are looking well.
What is the still, Robbo? What do you mean still looking gorgeous?
Well, you've always looked, you know, cut above the other lot, haven't you? Really?
Thank you very much,
That's
Robbo.
helped you in your career, of course, hasn't it? Just a bit. Have you ever used your feminine wiles just a bit to woo the silly executives we have at these stations? A bit?
It's never been necessary, Robbo. Perhaps they didn't find me attractive, but no, I have not used feminine wiles to have contracts signed. Are you talking about the casting couch?
Well, not that far necessarily. You have class, I assume.
I was never asked.
Really? Do you take that personally?
I'm relieved. I mean,
knowing
you've
some of the
met
bosses,
executives, haven't you?
Yes, that's right. I just wondered. I mean, I know, having spoken to executives whose IQ matches their age, how they employ women on television. You know, you're fully aware.
Of course I'm aware.
But all I can say quite kindly is the organ they think with varies in size. But I have seen them, I've been there, and I'd say, yes, but I won't say which channel it is. It's one I've worked in the last 25 years. And I'd say to them, excuse me, but she doesn't do the job well. Oh, she looks good, mate, you know.
Yes, I'm well aware of that, Robbo.
So despite that, you've done well. Remember Mr. Whitlam? Was it Mr. Whitlam?
I was about to bring that up. You were not great praise on one occasion. It was you were referring to Miss Smith's booking into...
So watch and you'll enjoy When the Whales Come. It's a film I could see again. It really touched me. Now, there's one thing I must mention, though. The use of music was excellent, as was the music itself. But I listened with the new 5-speaker Sony Dolby Pro Logic system. Now, that really made the film. The difference was enormous. Dolby stereo encoded surround films are identified with the last credit like this one here. But I warn you, if you get such a system, you'll hear the film better than at any theatre. You'll never leave your house, you'll lose your job, and you'll be ecstatic. Life is very short. Make the effort, but watch When the Whales... yes, we're going to change that Robos business. It is a bit bubby, isn't it, really? Even at Katoomba, I wasn't called Robbo. In fact, they called me something which I had to look up in a dictionary, one of those medical ones, and it was actually technically incorrect at that age. Anyway, so we're going to change that later. Not that it matters, it just makes me feel better. By the way, I'm indebted to someone who sent in some works of sign writers. It seems... Is there not a trade that has more literate people than sign writing? Most of them can't spell accommodation. Have a look at this one. Spot the deliberate error. Would you vote for this man? Where is the error? No wonder he's independent. The trouble is the people who would vote for him wouldn't fill out the form correctly. We have a few more of those this evening, just to sort of make you feel either bad or indifferent or whatever, or superior. The film tonight is called When the Whales Came. It's set in the Scilly Isles off Britain. Beautiful film. I really enjoyed it. Sound like Bill, don't I? And what else? Sue Smith's coming in to talk about her week. Well, not her week specifically. And Johnny Diesel is going to come in and talk to me about life and death and playing the guitar, and he will sing with his saxophoning friend. So I better shut up, hadn't I? I'm going to squeeze all that in. Well, Queensland today won first prize, we think, in the Futurity Stakes, taking home a multi-function. What's happening about that Polis business at all? Why don't they make it at Nyngan? I mean, the whole place is gone there. It's in the central west of New South Wales, handy to Coonabarabran and Melbourne and whatever. Do something useful, but it seems very weird. The last place that was actually designed was Canberra, was it not? They got rid of some farmland and put a lot of little funny people in there. Now, if you're a latent traveller, that is, you're never there on time, but lacked the cash, now might be the time to join the jet set. Now, East West Airlines, great name for an airline, isn't it, has announced cuts of up to 50% to most Australian capital cities. They're taking out all the windows. Now, that brings them into line with Ansett and Australian Airlines, who announced big price cuts last week. But why now, you might well ask? Well, it probably has something to do with deregulating the industry. We can't complain about our air safety record yet, but minor incidents make you wonder how long our commercial airline industry can go before there's a serious problem. A South Australian hospital employee was infected by an AIDS sufferer's needle. Dr. David Lookey from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital says health workers face a 1 in 200 chance of being infected if they're pricked with a needle from an AIDS patient. Well, hasn't he, after that accident, that man with the golf? By the way, this is David Lyle's tie. I'll speak to Mr. Packer when he turns up to get David Lyle back on air. He used to do a great show on Sunday nights. He's slowly getting back on air. This is his tie. It's nice of him, isn't it? I see one screw is missing from Mr. Lyle's nameplate on his car parking spot. It's cruel. It's a cruel business. It's a cruel world. Not as cruel as in some countries. Romanians loyal to the government have been coming out from under their rocks to support President Ion Iliescu. About 10,000 miners, M-I-N-E-R-S, armed with clubs, have been patrolling the streets of Bucharest, stopping cars and pedestrians to search bags and inspect identity papers. Iliescu, who won national elections last month, has branded protesters as watching the sort of thing night after night. One wonders whether one has any ability to care about anything anymore. You see a shooting, you say which country is it this time? You see people rioting, which country is it? Drugs, which country? What if I can sue someone? Now, being born can be a dangerous business, especially if your mum is an elephant. San Diego Animal Park is celebrating the birth of Omar, a member of the endangered Asian elephant species. Look at it. What a little cutie. He weighs 115 kilograms. Gee, I weigh about that. When he was somewhat unceremoniously born to 17-year-old Connie, who's still looking for the father. Handlers had to race in to rescue the youngster from being trampled, evidently because the mother had no experience of rearing youngsters, which is usually learned from the elders of the herd. What was I saying? There are joys, aren't there? Some local yodels today left Sydney to challenge the Swiss. I think there's a long shot to the rear of the horse may or not have been appropriate. As the man said, it's a gift. If it was a gift, I'd send it back. Well, after the break, talk and music with Johnny Diesel. But first, let me quote Glenn A. Baker, guitarist, vocalist and songwriter. Johnny Diesel is the biggest thing on the Australian rock scene since Jimmy Barnes. I might add he's a lot quieter than Mr. Barnes too, but so was World War II. Well, now here's a man who seems often in a black mood. That is, he sounds black. You just listen to Please Send Me Someone to Love. Anyone singing like that is bound to get a favourable response. Well, Johnny Diesel is from Massachusetts, came to Australia when he was 9. His real name is Mark Lizotte. He inherited the name from the name of the band. I thought I'd get that out of the way early. Here is Mr. Diesel. See, I have to ask you that.
That's
good.
right.
I want to ask you, though, this success thing which you're now enjoying, is it getting too much, is it? I'd like to thank the person who rang in about the whereabouts of my lady last night. Remember that? Yeah. Someone said, what a remarkable similarity she has to an actress. And I asked the people here, in fact, all day, and no one said, not at all. I showed the picture. I said, does this look like anyone? They said, yes, it looks like a human. I said, I'm not joking. Anyone you know? No. So it's interesting, isn't it? Perhaps the set needs adjusting. Anyway, thank you. And we have a whole lot of explanations about Lake George, which I'll perhaps give to you on Friday night. Now, Rolf Harris, is he in tonight, is he? Yes. Rolf Harris will be in to talk about Rolf Harris and also sing a song. We got the Notting Hill Billies. I don't have a rundown, you see, Robert. This sort of means I'm the last to know what's going on. But I don't mind that. Why should I know what's going on? Because I then start being a busybody and plan things. However, we do have, I think, if I shut up, the Clio Awards. That's the awards not for the sexiest men in the world, but for the best commercials in the world. So, but also we looked at a commercial tonight on ABC America. This is about drinking and driving. Have a look at this.
When friends don't stop friends from drinking and driving. Friends die from drinking and driving. Friends die from drinking and driving can kill a friendship.
Nothing I can add there. Well, the World Health Organization has been conducting yearly think tanks on AIDS. It has been about 6 years now. This year there's still no good news, but there is a lot of anger and frustration. The International AIDS Conference attracts both medical researchers. The number could reach 20 million by the year 2000. 20 million. And that is in San Francisco, I think, the conference, which may or may not be appropriate. Now, the AIDS conference, in fact, presents a special problem in a city like San Francisco, so they'll need some special police. New South Wales Police Minister Ted Pickering has criticised officers involved in the shooting of Darren Brennan. Mr. Pickering hopes an apology to the Brennan family will help heal the wound. This is a curious story, this one. A mine explosion in the New South Wales Hunter Valley appears to have masked seismological readings from a minor earthquake in the Newcastle area today. Residents of the Newcastle district reported a minor tremor at 11 o'clock this morning, but a seismograph in the city failed to pick up any disturbance. However, instruments in Canberra and Armidale, New South Wales, detected a routine mine explosion in the Hunter Valley, set off at exactly the same time as the Newcastle tremor. Why didn't they wait? It's still not clear why the Newcastle instrument did not record any disturbance. So at times like this I should bring up the Pope. I mean, he has a contact, or the actually the head of the Anglican Church, I fell for this, is not the Archbishop of Canterbury, it's the Queen of England. Did you know that? Ring her up and say, excuse me, you don't know us, we work on the Hunter Valley, we're going to set a mine off, is it all right? No, I think we should wait a moment. Thanks for it. Sorry to trouble you. That's all right, we're happy with that. That's interesting, isn't it? Well, of course, here's a case, we've got to follow up on this. We'll get out one of our intrepid reporters to find out why the Newcastle instrument did not record any disturbance. I'm intrigued by that. That's the bit that sticks out in my mind. I will not sleep tonight till I know. Industry Minister John Button has arrived in Tokyo to flog the multi-function, extremely wide elephant to the Japanese. Hopes are that we can still fool enough people to get the project off. Well, I wonder why they don't put it somewhere useful, like on the middle of the Nullarbor. At least we might get some irrigation there or something. Or Bunbury, or Katoomba, or Swan Hill, or nowhere, or Japan. There's no room there, of course. We have a sad story coming up shortly, how to crash a plane and kill 73 people without really trying.
I'm going to bring you about 15 miles northeast and then turn you back home for the approach. Is that fine with you and your fuel? I guess so, thank you.
Martin is on camera too. How's the little band going, Martin?
Very well, thank you.
Very well. You still with it?
Sort of.
Sort of. I got a fax about you, and I mentioned last night about your ability with women. One of your anonymous ladies sent me a fax and suggested that you weren't so hot. Won't talk to her again, will you? If you only knew who she was. Now, you'll search high and low for a B-day in Australia. Are you people familiar with what a B-day is? In a country where the humidity is often high and the people often similar, like Australia, one would expect a B-day as a necessity and not an architectural affectation. Now, in Japan, where things are always different, like the other version of the Amoebius strip, you aware of that? I shall demonstrate that one night. It's quite fascinating. They have invented a toilet bowl that sprays the seated one with jets of hot water shortly after the deed is done. You note the timing is an important factor here. The Japanese invented the intelligent bowl in the 50s, about the time of the Smiley films in Australia. The latest models actually take an interest in you. They perform urine tests and record arterial tension. Happily, they don't actually take your temperature. Now, this appears to be one war the Japanese are winning. And that's all true. Cross my heart and hope to lift and separate. Really, it's true. Shame if they didn't warn you, wouldn't it? Oh. It's not disgusting either. Mikhail Gorbachev said today he might soon cease to be chief of the Soviet Union. There could be another General Secretary of the Communist Party within the fortnight, he said. It is still not clear whether he is threatening to quit or fears he might be removed as party chief at a Soviet Congress next month. Well, who'd blame Mr. Gorbachev for wanting out of at least one of his hot seats? He's looking just a bit frazzled. He spent a day at the Russian Communist Party conference where he copped it around the ears, despite his appeals for all concerned to be reasonable in these days. Ion Iliescu has today been sworn in as the new president. Well, it was touch and go there for a while whether Mr. Iliescu would actually get to take up his job. No sooner was he elected than he was challenged by the students and the same underground movements that helped depose dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. But Mr. Iliescu found help from an underground movement of his own, the miners, who took time off from their dark and smelly work to break a few limbs. Well, now the country was heading there with miner rule there at one stage. Now, there's been a disaster at sea. 2 explosions have occurred on the United States aircraft carrier, the Midway, near Japan. The Navy has not yet disclosed the number of casualties, but said at least 4 burn victims had been flown. There are no such things as little mistakes in jet airliners. A mistake is a disaster. What was astounding about the mistake made on board a jet which crashed in New York in January is that everybody seemed so jolly relaxed as it simply ran out of fuel.
Avianca 052 tells air traffic controllers it can only fly in the holding pattern another 5 minutes or so.
Yes, sir. We'll be able to hold about 5 minutes. That's all we can do.
But there have been thunderstorms. The sky is crowded with planes low on fuel.
Target 692, how are we making out? We got enough fuel for the approach and landing, and that's it. Okay, I understand.
You have a lot of aircraft that are concerned about their fuel usage. They've all been holding. And so they're all asking questions about how long is it going to be, I'm getting low on fuel. Well, that can mean a wide variety of things.
Avianca 052 never used the phrase it should have used, fuel emergency. Even so, it would have landed safely, but it missed its first approach.
Executing a mass approach, Avianca 052 heavy. Avianca 052, you're making the left turn, correct, sir? That's right, 2180 on the heading, and we'll try once again, we're running out of fuel.
052 kept saying, we're running out of fuel, but without the word emergency, they waited their turn.
We're traveling at 10,000, and we're running out of fuel.
Controllers say there just isn't time to ask follow-up questions.
I'm going to bring you about 15 miles northeast and then turn you back on for the approach. Is that fine with you and your fuel? I guess so. Thank you very much.
It wasn't fine.
Avianca 052, we just lost 2 engines and we need the priority, please. Avianca 052, you have enough fuel to make it to the airport? Avianca 052, radar contact lost.
Pointed, isn't it? Some television ads great, a few are great. Now, here are some which have made their mark. Oh, ad people wonderful, aren't they? They really are wonderful. Lunch between 9 and 5. And then they amalgamate. And who knows what they do then. Especially the artistic ones, with bandages around their head and funny earrings to show they're artistic. See, I'm not. It was a place in Scotland. Rolf Harris was the best-known Australian export. He was the one with the extra leg and a wobble board. The British took to him and he to them. He has been there for about 30 years. Well, it's a long trip for the lad on the kids' show from Perth. At the moment, he's hosting a television show in Britain called Rolf's Cartoon Time. It has a fan club of over 100,000 little human beings. Actually, at the moment, he's here in Australia to do some concerts and make a few bob doing an ad or two. Mr. Harris, now 60, although he doesn't look it, has one leg in the UK and the other in Australia. But what about the other one? I've got to say, you haven't aged. You don't fiddle at all, do you, like the Americans? I mean, this is you, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, no stitches or anything.
But you know the American obsession with trying to look 18 all your life?
Yeah, and then finish up, you look a glassy 18 like this.
I imagine when they're cremated, there's a violent explosion. I remember seeing you in the old days when I was in Perth, doing marvellous stuff on the local kids show. You've got a... It's almost as though you aren't on television. You seem to go over this fence, whereas we tend to say we're brought up, or we think we are, we're on this side of the camera, you're there, I'm doing something for you. You somehow got over that. Was that a conscious thing?
It's a funny old thing. When I was 16 in Perth, I remember reading, this was just after the war, 46, reading an article about television hitting America. Suddenly the cinemas, nobody's going because the people are watching this little box in the corner of their living rooms. And it said then that the people that made it from radio onto television were the ones that were able to look at a camera and know that they were talking to an individual in a room, one person, just that distance away. And the ones that couldn't make it from radio to television were the ones who had to keep looking at the script and their eyes went shifty and they were afraid to look, and so you didn't trust them suddenly. And I thought then, at the age of 16, I thought I could do that. I could look at a camera lens and believe I was talking to a person. And when I got the first jobs in television in England, I used to practice in my little room in Earl's Court, one room I was living in. Yeah. £3 a week, full board. Yeah. But I used to practice with a doorknob and imagine that was the television lens, and talk to the doorknob and then go away and do something else and refer back to the doorknob as if it's another person watching.
Yeah.
So
when did you realise what you would... I hope it rusts to death. I hope it falls off the container into the sea because they lose containers. Silly man. If they sent the money to us, we'd try harder, wouldn't we? Agreed? I picked up something at a hi-fi shop today. The place used to be a brothel, and I don't mean it was untidy, so I felt just a little self-conscious on the way out. The owners of Victoria's largest brothel, which opened today, say it's been designed for the luxury end of the entertainment market, and I've never heard it referred to like that before. To operate, and will be the first allowed to operate in the city's business district, which means jogging at lunchtime will be much more fun. Borrowing from Ch9's brilliant idea, the place has a glass lift so that people can recognise you instantly. We do hope the girls have lessons in makeup, and the men who go there realise that the organ they think with is not in their heads. I find the whole idea quite repulsive. Nothing in the world is that desperate. Nothing. I suppose it's a fringe benefit if you work in the entertainment industry, isn't it? On the subject of news, now I've been reading news on and off. I often read it off for about war. And watching news can drive you crazy because A, there is too much violence, physical or otherwise. B, there's a scarcity of news to make one feel happy, or even two. C, even after watching an item, one is often none the wiser. D, with the best of intentions, you might only get one or two sides of an argument, because that is all we can get. E, people tell lies. We know they tell lies, but they keep doing it. F, there is simply no resolution to half the things you see. And G, things are not going to get better. The problem is people, they keep having more of them. But made you feel better? So what does one do? One gives something for the heart, like this. I actually enjoyed reading through the phone calls. We get a list of them, and it's fair. I mean, it's quite reasonable that people should ring. We don't get names and addresses, so there's no pink truck with cement coming around to put on your front lawn at 3 in the morning. Although I used to do that in the old days. It was great fun. People used to object. I'd say, look, it's a democracy. Shut up. Anyway, some phone calls from last night. Now, if you heard last night's phone calls, you'll see some relativity or relationship here. If you didn't, I'd have to explain last night's one, which takes too long, so I don't know what to do. Someone said here, people don't go anywhere when they die, they get taken. I suppose it depends where you die. If you die in the middle of a street, you know, Swanston Street, you get taken, you don't stay there and rot. Although I don't know whether they've changed things there. Now, this thing about honkies, remember I said, it was my understanding, he said, covering himself, that the reason that black people call white people honkies is because the white people had the cars and they'd honk their horns to get the black people out of the way, so the black people call them honkies. Apparently the latest version of this, and we've had about 52 of them, is that Hungarians, Canadians refer to Hungarians as honkies, which really has nothing to do with it, but I thought someone would throw that in. A couple of responses to the Riverside debutante ball. No responses from Bondi, which is interesting. They probably thought, gee, someone's let the cat out of the bag. This is the bit that made coming to work a joy today. You remember someone rang and said, we didn't see the program in the guide for last Thursday and Friday, therefore was last Wednesday's the last one of the year. I said last night, yes it was. Last Wednesday's was the last show of the year. Apparently that hasn't satisfied everyone. It says, why did Clive say the show finished last Wednesday? And does this mean, therefore, that tonight's and any future programs are repeats? Of course they're repeats. You think we're on holidays now? This is the best of. Remember I said this a few months ago? Even this bit is a repeat. A few cases for compulsory retrospective contraception there, I think. Anyway, please ring if you want to, but don't be rude to us. Wish I understood all that. Wish I understood Mr. Keating. I'm sure Mr. Keating wish he understood Mr. Keating sometime. When I was away, my little holiday over last Christmas, I probably mentioned, but I was out photographing and was warned not to go to certain places because there were snakes everywhere. Now, I'm not a sook. Far be it from me to mention I'm a sook. I'm not a sook. I'm just not crazy about reptiles. Even little lizards. I'll drive 50 kilometres to avoid a little lizard because they might be a rogue killer one, you see. So I just drive around them. Anyway, Victorians are being warned to watch out for snakes this summer. High rainfalls over the past 2 years have seen frogs and lizards proliferate. They are snakes' favourite food, that and Mars bars. So snakes have been breeding well as well. Wonder how snakes do it. Good point, isn't it? I mean, how would you recognise if the other snake was eligible? I mean, where do you put the wedding ring? Actually, I just thought of that. I was thinking in terms of whether it was a male or a female. And do they have artistic people amongst the snake thing? You know, two little Rodney and Child. You know, but I mean, it's really quite complicated. For us, it's it's complicated. For them, it's even worse. It'd be awful to take a snake out for a free meal. You know, some nice little mice and things, and then discover that it was a bloke. If you were a bloke, or was married, you see. Anyway, these are the snake's favourite food, as I mentioned. That is lizards and frogs and things like that that bump in the night. So snakes have been breeding well as well, except for the confused ones. Unfortunately, the warning, and this is the sad part of it, comes too late for a family. It's a pretty tragic story, but I've got to say, despite what that gentleman said, it wasn't a plague. Last year, if that's any example, I counted 47 snakes. 47 snakes. And the poor father. Poor probably in a literal sense. Well, Qantas, that best known of Australian Airlines, is celebrating its 70th birthday, as you might have noticed. Well, someone at HQ opened an old trunk and found some marvellous memories of how elegant and untroubled flying used to be. Open anything, a trunk, a flower show, a bottle, and you'll find our aviation correspondent, Geoffrey Watson, is there.
Rose Bay, Sydney, 1938. The passengers are checking in for the pre-war equivalent of Qantas Flight 1 to London. But this isn't a jumbo with 390 seats. It's an Empire flying boat carrying just people. 50 years ago, this was travel in style. 9 days to get to England. You flew only during the hours of daylight and landed at dusk to go ashore and sleep in a hotel. The flying boat rode at anchor in the bay. You were taken out to it by launch. Then another boat checked the takeoff run for floating debris. Facilities at Rose Bay were primitive in those days. At first there was no slipway, so the boats couldn't be taken out of the water. Work on the engines was carried out while they rode at anchor. The engineering workshop was a corrugated iron shed. Next to it, the catering section. But even by today's standards, the Empire boats were luxurious. There were reclining seats, panoramic windows, and full bar service. You didn't fly that fast, about 240 kilometres an hour, and not very high, only about 5,000 feet. But this was still travel for the privileged few. only the very rich could afford the £400 return fare to England. In flight, there wasn't much to do except eat, drink and sleep, although often the passengers would run a tote to guess the arrival time at the next port. Today, a Qantas 747-400 takes less...
Yeah. I was going to say it takes me back, but I wasn't around then, of course. I was only born in the 60s, so I wouldn't understand these things. A question was asked by one of our technical crew here, and they are inquisitive little creatures. You can see them all over the building, in corners together. Why are the wings bent up on that thing? Apparently because the hangars are now smaller than they used to be due to some local regulations, so they had to just make them like that, which is interesting. I wouldn't have kind of hit my mind, but I'm not technical, you see. I'm just I don't know what I am, but I'm just one of them. Victoria's power supplies flickered dangerously today as the dispute in the Latrobe Valley unexpectedly deteriorated. It was only after bitter recriminations in the Industrial Relations Commission that the situation... Now, did he say that story, how many cars were knocked off a year, did he? Because, you see, I wonder if it's in the... I don't want to be cynical here at all. I mean, I work in a news department, but is it in the interest of car manufacturers to limit people buying new ones, if you see my point? If your car gets knocked off, you might never see it again. You go and buy a new one, don't you? So I wonder how earnest they are, because they could have done that years ago. Really could have done it years ago. Chain it to a power pole. I always do that. I always do that. Or as people tend to say, a telegraph pole. I've spoken to one of the journalists at another station recently who used the expression, a car hit a telegraph pole. I said, do you know Morse code has not been used for communications by people in cities for a couple of years now? He looked at me in the way that a lot of journalists do, which is they don't quite focus on you. He said, oh, are you having a go at me? I said, no, far be it from me. Young Einstein, that is a consolation, yes. Who wants smart people, especially if they're a lot younger? And we like to say, oh, when he gets older, they'll catch up. What a clever little I didn't have a clue what he was doing. I could have been bright if I'd worked at school, but I never wanted to, you see. I remember the teacher saying to me in 1951, saying, Robertson, how they male teachers are always very butch. They have to, Robertson, they never look at you. You're never going to make it, you know. And he was right. He was right. But I didn't listen. I was watching two flies on the little window there, and I don't know what they were doing, but one wanted to be a lot taller than the other. Years later, someone explained to me. I said, oh, how interesting. 45 years ago, the world, Germany excluded, thought Russian soldiers were wonderful chaps. After all, they were doing most of the dying as the Allies closed in on Adolf Hitler in Berlin. The trouble was the Russians didn't know when to take the hint and leave. But events in Eastern Europe have seen more than 350,000 Soviet soldiers virtually stranded in East Germany, with nothing much to do these days. The Germans just want them to pack up their troubles in their old kit bags and go. And now running through the main news again, the future of British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher is being decided at this moment at a poll among Conservative Party members. She's being challenged by Michael Heseltine. In fact, fresh off the press here, they've begun casting their ballots. As the voting got underway, Thatcher's aides... I didn't know she had aides. What a terrible way to... Thatcher's friends confidently predicted she would win, while challenger Michael Heseltine and his supporters, see, he's not standing up too well, said they had sufficient backing to force a second ballot next week. A total of 372 MP are eligible to vote. I could try that in English, but why not? And under a complex set of rules, Thatcher needs to win at least 187 votes, as well as 56 more than Heseltine. Voting closes at 0500 AEST, with the result expected to be known within half an hour. 05, that's 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, isn't it? We could just stay open for it. Visiting Sydney tonight, Prime Minister Hawke said Australia was shaping up for economic recovery. What does that mean? Next year, with interest rates and inflation on their way down. In finance, the Australian stock market closed firmer today because of a rally in the afternoon. Royal commissions are a bit like pulling a thread on a sweater. One little tug and things can start to unravel with alarming speed. So why is Western Australia so keen to tinker around with... They could use my father. He's a solicitor in Perth. I'm sure he'd like to take a couple of years off and just confuse everyone. That's what the Royal Commissions do. I don't know whether you heard this news. In fact, a friend of mine is Asian. In fact, I have friends of all nationalities. Very few Australian ones, though. I don't know what that means. He said, "You hear about Miri Vaneri?" I said, "I beg your pardon?" "Did you hear about Miri Vaneri?" I said, "I think there's a clinic you can go to for that." No, you hear about Miri Vaneri." "Ah, Milli Vanilli." "Yeah, Miri Vaneri." I said, "No." I should have said yes. Well, apparently, Miri Vaneri, the group has been stripped of its Grammy Awards because it was found that the duo had not sung a note on their award-winning album. I don't know how I'll sleep tonight. Grammy officials in Los Angeles decided to withdraw the music industry trophy for Best New Artists after revelations by the duo's producer that other singers did the winning vocal to a mound of the group's records, CDs and cassettes. Which is rather silly, really. I mean, if they enjoyed the music, does it matter whether it was or not? Certainly would have saved me going through that this afternoon with my little friend from east of us, the west of us. Why are they from the east or from the west? I'm a bit confused with that. What's it matter, silly people? They look silly anyway, didn't they? All those little, look like wicks for titty lamps, didn't they? Silly people. Have no idea they know nothing about personal hygiene, too. They look a bit sweaty, didn't they, sort of? Actually, when I first met this gentleman, he said to me, "Hello, Clive, I believe you take Super 8mm." And I thought, oh dear, what have I done? This translator was, "Hello, Clive, I believe you take Super 8mm. This man stumbled on the more number of L's in any other sentence, any sentence ever. "I believe you take Super 8mm. I said, "Of course I do." And I ran away. He's a nice bloke. He's been on the Great Wall, which is more than I can say for me. In fact, he fell off the Great Wall, which might explain his problem. Now, as I've said from time to time, I don't know where the 80s went. I do remember the 70s, though. I'd rather forget it. The 70s, to me, was a decade of loud and silly music and even sillier clothing. I mean, who in their right mind would have worn flared trousers? Tommy was very much a film of the 70s. It's being revived around the world to celebrate the reforming of The Who, a group who caused a lot of noise and damage during the movie. Here are Elton John, Roger Poultry, and The Who. This is. I thought you might be interested, since I have a spare moment. This is what we get from the satellite. This is a picture. It's actually a picture taken, from outer space. The different shades of grey mean the different heights of the clouds. So some give us rain, some don't. This is where the meteorologists come in. I think that goes to Japan, doesn't it? And then it goes up, it's at 1.6 gigahertz or something. I've got a receiver that will receive it, but apparently a coffee tin is a good antenna when you get to 1.6 gigahertz. What's a gigahertz, I suppose you're asking? Can't tell you everything. Anyway, that comes off a satellite, and they draw a little line in. I just thought I'd show you. So you saw the clouds for today, and it'll be explained now if you look at the prognostic. And not very windy, really, but we've had some cool weather recently. We really have. I've been watering my little plant at home. Makes no difference. They've now put little umbrellas have appeared above the little plants. These tiny, perfectly formed umbrellas. I think it's their way of saying, "We've received too much water, thank you, Mr. Robertson." Or they say Robinson, because they're only little plants. But the thing said they'll be okay to eat in a week to 10 days. It's been 3 months. Now, either it's been a typographical error or my usual charm has worked with creatures on this earth and they've just retreated. But I keep watering them, they keep drinking it. One burped the other day and I said, which one of you was it now? It'll all look sheepish, if that's how a flower would look. But it really, they're not going to be edible. They're changing colours now. They're going to brown, which I think means they've... See, I've got to be honest, one half has to be in the shade most of the time, the other half has to be in the sun half the time. And I put them in lengthwise. How do you do that? I don't know how Don Burke does it. Especially with that funny beard of his. You know, they had a shot of him behind a hedge once and they couldn't find him. They said, "Where are you, Don?" And he said, "I'm here." And we could see what's just... I worry about men who wear beards. And women, too, if it comes to that. All right, the forecast for tomorrow. Cairns will be fine on 30. A chance of a late thundery shower. Thundery thundery shower. What if my friend who likes Vaneri, he's got a friend who works for the Weather Bureau Broome. Late thundery shower. At 35. I said to him, if I can send you up, why can't you send me up? He said, no, I don't. It's a quirk of nature. Murray Vanuri. I never did like Murray Vanuri anyway. Does Raccoon Head know about that? Does he? Probably do a special on that in Friday night. I saw him at the airport the other day. Surrounded by little adoring fans. I don't know how he does it. Must be the hair. I'll be back tomorrow night, all going well. Perhaps you will too. There's a bit of the criminal, it seems, in almost all of us. A leading criminologist says each time you take a sickie, when you're not ill, you are committing a crime against your employer. Well, we did know that. Dennis Challenger, has told a conference in Adelaide on crime victims that Australians don't take crime in the workplace seriously enough. Mr. Challenger says the concept of workplace crime should be redefined to include the theft of time. He says this occurs when employees receive pay for periods when they aren't working productively for their employer. What amuses me, as you know, we've had a quest recently looking for a partner for me. By the way, we should have results either way, whether it has any basis or not, I don't know. Finding Miss Right in any form in this world, there might be Mr. Right. But anyway, it's interesting the number of people who wrote on company letterhead and sent it via company letters, you know, the actual envelopes, right? These are people you're meant to trust. They're writing on company letterhead, in company envelopes, and one suspects that the company paid for the postage as well. I would have thought that was an undiplomatic way to do anything. Yes, I mean, it's just a bit of cheating, isn't it? A bit of cheating. I knew a policeman used to borrow the local police car and you'd take it for weekends. When I worked in the PMG many years ago in Perth, there was a super tech there when he was sober who would borrow the PMG truck for his football team and drive it kilometres and kilometres, and they used to ask him why, and he'd say, oh mate, it's government. Yes, we all do it, don't we? And we don't, in Australia, of course, you don't dob anyone in, you just don't do that, do you? Next time we have a cricket match, we should have close-ups of the crowd, shouldn't we? Kim Beazley, the Federal Communications Minister, has tried to distance himself from the unsettled state of the television industry, saying Canberra is not responsible. He said they're largely the result of high salaries, not here, poor investment and bad management. I mean, the point is, it's not that important. There are books you can read, there are people you can talk to or fight with, there are walks you can take, there is music you can listen to, there's so many things. I mean, really, when you start to wonder about and complain about television, it's only run by human beings, and if you were in charge, you'd probably do more or less the same. And it's not that important. News is important if you don't want to be ignorant about things, but basically, you can switch it off at any time. If you refuse not to switch off, well, then you shouldn't complain. I think I got that right, didn't I? I don't watch telly much, except for, as I told you, SBS, when they have those nice foreign movies on. And the ladies, you know they're going to take all their clothes off in about an hour, and you just watch. And they do, and they're just lovely. Little subtitles all over their bits. Like that. If we got rid of sport on television, that would be a step forward for those with brains. But that will come, perhaps in a couple of years. The doctrine of communism is all for one and one for all. But with the Soviet Union in financial straits, the growing doctrine for day-to-day life is dog eat dog. Crime is flourishing because, in an ironic twist, people aren't as scared of the police as they used to be. One thing they are scared of, though, is going hungry. This two-part report looks at life today in the Soviet Union. It has the Russians pining for the old days when, even if you had to queue, there was generally food. From iron curtains to steel doors, it's charming, isn't it? Great world, isn't it? Wonderful. Bet you're dying to have another kiddie. Coming up shortly on this program, the big names of rock sing the music of Cole Porter. A little coda to that story we had before the break. Germans have poured money into a nationwide television appeal to avert a famine in the Soviet Union. The German leaders urged viewers to help Soviet President Gorbachev and his people through a harsh winter of food and fuel shortages and political unrest. By the end of the 45-minute telethon, sounds tame compared with ours, viewers have pledged more than $2.5 million Australian, the equivalent, with individual contributions as high as $260,000. The United Nations report says the country faces its worst food shortages since World War II. I keep sighing. I can't help it. It just seems everywhere we look, this man at work, shooting himself collectively in the foot. I don't know what the answer is. The question's a bit strange, isn't it? And we're going through a tough time, but nowhere near as tough as elsewhere. I know it's not a great consolation. Well, toys are supposed to be for fun. They're not supposed to hurt you. The Queensland government wants to keep it that way. Do we know who filmed that particular story, do we? We should give credit to them sometimes. They work hard. Film. I remember Muri. How can we forget them? Rob Pilatus was freed from jail on $13,050 bond. That's not much, is it? That's Australian. As you know, he's apparently tied up a 25-year-old woman, and anyway, he said his response to the media, of course, as you know, he's such a quick thinker, is too much publicity. It was a bit out of sync, of course, when he said it, but you can't get everything right. So there you are. I think it's all very funny. I bet you the sales of Muri have gone up enormously since that. I mean, if you like the music, what's it matter who sings it? Sometimes it's a disappointment to see them, especially when they look like Milli Vanilli. It seems there is warm blood in those veins after all, and unusually emotional. Margaret Thatcher has officially handed over to her successor. Fortunate here, but last night I think we noted that, well, I noted for the first time that the whole of Downing Street is taken up by the people in power. I don't know why 10 is next to 11. I know that's the sort of way they behave in England, but in Australia it's generally opposites, isn't it? You go odds and evens on the other side. I'm just curious. It might be the way that just one of those little things that'll plague me for months. Well, the United States could soon have a new batch of spooky ghost towns. More and more people are leaving the small towns of America for the big cities. But some specks on the map are straining their brains trying to come up with ideas to stop. There's a lot of gems. If you're a regular, even if you're an irregular watcher of this program, you'll have seen the story we had from America on the old Route 66, all the charming, decaying things of yesteryear. Great to photograph. Perhaps one day I'll do it. I shall return. Former Queensland Cabinet Minister Brian Austin is spending tonight in custody after a jury failed to reach a verdict on charges brought against him. The jury will continue deliberations on 35 misappropriation charges tomorrow morning. Mr. Austin has pleaded not guilty to all charges, which allege he misused almost $9,000 of his ministerial expenses. Did I tell you about Willie Nelson? You know Willie Nelson, on the road again. You'd think the man who had a slight tax problem really has no one else to blame. I must tell you the extent of tax that Willie Nelson, the singer, the one who wears plaits, guess how much he owes the IRS in America? He owes $16.7 million American. And so guess what they're doing? His little fans of Willie are planning a fundraising Willie weekend, which sounds pretty revolting to me, actually. To help the singer with his tax problems, James Hathaway, an organiser of Willie Aid. There's a couple of lines there, aren't there? Said as many as a dozen bands have agreed to perform Saturday and Sunday at Austin's Broken Spoke Dance Hall, where Nelson often played before he fell on hard times, spending $16 million American of the state's money. And the items will be donated by Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, Texas Governor-elect Ann Richards, and Jack Pickle, Congressman Jack Pickle. I mean, the man hasn't just forgotten to pay it, has he? $16.7 million, that's $21 million Australian. That's as of September the 21st. It's probably triple that by now. Poor old Willie, be very wary of grown men who wear plaits and wear bandages to cover the scar. Will he or won't he? Just as silly, of course, is bungee jumping. It looks as easy as falling off a log, but it helps if you're a bit weird to start with. Canadians are the latest to catch bungee fever.
There's really no adjectives to describe this kind of thing.
Nice face.
So you just let basic sound do it.
You have to be crazy.
The bungee zone's been a smash hit ever since it opened its doors last August.
Okay, and I guess I go up the very edge here.
We put a wireless microphone on 37-year-old Ray Stout for his first jump.
It's a long way down there.
140 feet to be exact.
Okay, nerve-wracking time. Bring the arms out and let her go. Whoa, that is quite the experience. Lord, whoa!
Eric Thompson has jumped 10 times.
Bungee, woo! Ah!
Remember when your mother used to tell you,
Woo! Whoa, let's get some friend. Whoa, elevator air.
just because your friend says he's going to jump off a bridge doesn't mean you have to. Clearly, Eric never listened.
Why do they make silly noises? They're Willie Nelson fans. I suppose it's fun. You shouldn't knock it till you try it, although there are a few things in life you shouldn't try. It looks like fun. What if the rope breaks? Wow. You die making funny noises. It really does get to me when the young use their youth as an excuse for ignorance, for instance, over music. I've never heard of Cole Porter. They whine, I'm too young. Well, Beethoven was born long before I was, and I've heard of him. Well, soon you won't have an excuse if you're young not to have heard of Cole Porter. Some of the top names of rock and roll have got together to record an album of Mr. Porter's finest music to raise money for more. You see, that's a song of the past. Can't wait for Milli Vanilli to do one. I wonder who'd sing it for them. Who do we think should sing for them? Michael Jackson or his sister? Or, they both look the same. There was an award on last night or somewhere I was watching. Was it CBS or somewhere? And she came on until they put the super. I didn't know which one she was. It's a shame. They want to be, so desperately want to be white. Not pleasing some of the blacks in America. I wouldn't take it. I'd take it personally as well. Milli Vanilli, yes, I think the Jacksons. We wouldn't tell anyone. We wouldn't tell anyone. Well, still to come tonight, we'll have some music from someone with very... By the way, I've just been informed, because I don't get to know everything here. I'm busy. Red Hot and Blue is the program which will include those videotapes, the ones of Katie Lang, who's fabulous, and was that Sinead O'Connor, was it? She looked a bit hairier than I last remember. Perhaps she'd been out with Willie Nelson, spending all his money. Anyway, it'll be on Saturday night on this network. Don't miss it. It looks terrific. They're singing some great stuff. If we can only get some hair for Annie Lennox, we'll feel we've won. Perhaps Milli Vanilli could let them. She could mime with their hair. Gosh, they look silly. But still, I want to know is why there's not an investigation as to why they look so silly. But still, we wouldn't have many people left in the business if we removed the ones who look like village idiots with genetic problems. Now's the time for someone to look normal and sing well. What a break, what a novelty. So it's Saturday night on this network. Well worth staying in for, with a couple of quiet ones. And now running some of the late-breaking news, former Queensland Cabinet Minister Brian Austin is spending the night in custody after a jury failed to reach a verdict on misappropriation charges brought against him. He's pleaded not guilty. And we've just heard that the United Nations Security Council, meeting to consider a resolution for military force in the Gulf, will now begin at 7:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow morning. Could be a black day tomorrow, couldn't it? Well, in finance news, he said, smiling, the Australian stock market... Valerie Beckwith, the widow of the man who worked for Alan Bond for 20 years, has denounced as cowardly a reported accusation by the Perth millionaire that her husband, Peter Beckwith, was largely responsible for Bond Corp's down-close walk straight by our camera. So close to what life's like. What's a nice kid like Jerry Hall doing with Mick Jagger? To make it even more perplexing, she actually married old Rubber Lips in Bali this week, after years of going steady, as they say. I wonder if her dad asked Mick if he had a steady job. Well, I suppose playing rock star is better than working for a living. To mark the occasion of their marital union, here's a song. Actually, a friend of Michael Hutchins, is it Michael Hutchins from Inks, rang up and said, why does Mick Jagger keep copying him? I don't know. I don't know why he does these things. So such a lack of originality in the business. On that subject, here's... I mean, they can dress up in colours. It still doesn't make it interesting, you know. Do you want the forecast now, do we? Forecast for tomorrow, which is Friday, tends to be towards the end of the week. Cairns will be fine tomorrow, 22 to 3 degrees. Albany fine, 14 to 21. Geraldton, why did they come back to me? Was they getting bored with the map, were you? It does. We should move it a bit. Geraldton, fine, 14 to 31. Broome, fine, and 33 degrees. That's it. That's the program for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow. I look forward to that. Good night.
They are 9.
David Lyle here, used to appear on television, who says he's the executive producer of this program. He's hoping to get discount around the shops. Well, he sort of is. Went through my wardrobe to see if I had any grey shirts. He said, I don't like your grey shirts. I don't have any grey shirts. You'd think he'd get his television set adjusted properly after all these years. I've had a funny day. One of those, I woke up this morning with the penultimate straw, waiting for the last straw. And someone was sending me something on the fax, and it was a lot of technical information, and suddenly I heard beep, 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 and I looked down. They normally have a bit of red on the side of fax paper to tell you when it's running out, agreed? On the top, so you can see it. Oh no, there was that much underneath. I thought, that's very good. So I scouted around quickly, looking for all the fax paper I could find. All I could find was stuff that was about 3 millimetres longer than the stuff that would fit in my fax machine. And there's no way of adjusting the fax machine to put it in. So I was getting really angry at this stage. I can get really angry with things, not people. So I said, right. I did a Basil Fawlty. I went and got my saw, put on the chair and sawed away, right through the roll and through the chair. I looked at the chair and I thought, doesn't matter, right? Blew the dust off, put it in, it works perfectly. The chair doesn't work perfectly. And I thought, kept forgetting that I'm sitting on this chair, which is a bit draftier than it was before, feeling a bit of an idiot. And I got to work today after driving behind someone who was in 3 lanes at once, which is a bit of a challenge for anyone. A small car, person from one of the countries a bit west of Australia, a bit west, Murivanuri territory. And finally, after making a gesture to him, which I'm sure in medical circles would mean something, but probably didn't mean anything to him, I got to work. Then I had to ring someone, my voice nearly broke then, I had to ring someone who was in the A to K book last year, but they've changed the name of their company to the L to Z this year. All I could find was the L to Zs from last year and the A to Ks of this year. And I was roaring in the office saying, where are the bloody A to Zs for this year or whatever? And they just looked at me thinking I was a bit strange. So it's been one of those days, so nothing you can do tonight can make it worse. Except I must get rid of the grey shirts that I have. So apart from that, it's Friday. Cricket was exciting last night. You know, we gave the cricket results, didn't we? A little summary of the cricket. Someone rang up and said, we spoiled it for them by giving the results of the cricket. I can't win. I can't stand cricket. I put cricket on. I get abused for it. No more cricket. Got that fairly quickly. Well, former Rothwell's chief Laurie Connell was held by Perth police for more than an hour late this evening after being charged in connection with share market transactions. The charges follow 5 earlier charges of alleged misrepresentation. A coda to things Western Australia, anyway. Alan Bond has apologised for blaming his former managing director, the late Peter Beckwith, for the downfall of Bond Corporation Holdings. He said he was dismayed by the publicity from an interview with the Bulletin magazine. I wonder where they got it from then, if it didn't come from him. In which Mr. Bond said he made a mistake in giving too much responsibility to Mr. Beckwith. However, Mr. Bond says he had the highest regard for Mr. Beckwith in every respect. Well, I wonder where they got it from, Mr. Bond. Yesterday, Mr. Beckwith's wife, Valerie, angrily defended her husband, saying that Mr. Beckwith had worked himself to death for Bond Corp while Mr. Bond floated around the world. He does look as though he could float, doesn't he? Yeah, I wonder where they got it from, Mr. Bond. But I suppose, are you apologising for having said it? or for thinking it. We don't have that. Anyway, round to Mrs. Beckwith. Well, former Queensland Minister Brian Austin has tonight been jailed for 15 months. Remember, he's been jailed for 15 months after being found guilty on 25 misappropriation charges. The Brisbane jury took more than 24 hours to reach a verdict, and they were quite tired after it. Austin had pleaded not guilty that he misappropriated almost $9,000 of his ministerial expenses. He's been found guilty of misusing funds on trips to Armidale in northern New South Wales, where two of his daughters attended university, on family meals and holidays, and on takeaway Chinese food. I wonder what rorts private enterprise get into, and all their what do you call them? Shareholders have to pay for another story. A group of the Australians held hostage by the Iraqis have shown remarkable nonchalance despite the prospect of a war. They've chosen to return to Kuwait from Baghdad after visiting the Iraqi capital to meet with Australian envoys. Put his finger tightened a little further on the trigger today when the United Nations agreed to the military recapture of Kuwait if Iraqi troops have not left the emirate by January the 15th. The US had its way only after some tricky horse trading with the other members of the... No one cares about my problems today. It was just one of those days. You know that my little garden, I was growing a garden of things. They're virtually gone now. Waste of time, wasn't it? I knew as soon as I bought the seeds, a little voice said, "You're wasting your time, non-green fingers." Could use the compost for something else. Anyway, I'll probably try again in about 10 years' time. I suppose I should have watered them. That would have helped. The State Bank of New South Wales has started a new round of interest rate cuts, which hopefully will help some owners across the country get into debt, I would imagine. The bank has dropped its home mortgage rate to 14.5%, which is the lowest of all the major banks. And despite all the fuss yesterday when Treasurer Keating finally dropped the big R word, our leaders' forecast will be all...
John Hewson says it's the government that has to get its story straight, refuting Mr Keating's claims that the worst of the recession is already behind us.
Well, there's nothing in the data as I read it to suggest that we've turned the corner.
Peter Harvey, World Tonight.
We've got a lot of corners to turn, haven't we? An 8-year custody battle over the daughter of 2 American doctors has reportedly been settled in New Zealand. A family court judge... The rest of the world might be breathing down the Iraqi's neck, but the average citizen on the streets of Baghdad is taking it all very well, or so it seems. It could be they're just putting on a brave face for the cameras, or perhaps that they're used to dying after almost a decade of war with Iran. Remember that. Whatever, the nightlife of Baghdad carries on almost as normal, with some spiritual encouragement from Uncle. What I have not heard is what Hussein is saying to the Iraqis. I mean, how are they being sold the prospect of war? It's all right to get little bits and pieces there saying they're not afraid of dying or whatever, but what ideological support are they getting? How is the war being justified from there? And we haven't heard that, have we? Have we? No. I haven't. I didn't get the memo. I'd like to know. Be interesting to know whether we are being told the truth as well. You see, it's always. Remember in the Falkland War? Oh, there I was listening to my little shortwave receiver thinking everything I was hearing was true. And then we discover that even the BBC were feeding stuff that they were told to feed us. So there you go. Well, coming up after this brief break, one gentleman's view of the events of the week with the charming Jeffrey. Would you ask them then? Is there anyone awake in their control room, would you? Please? Hang in there. Yes, there is. Oh, there is music tonight. That's not what you said 10 seconds ago, is it?
Correct,
I don't know how Yana puts up with you. Yes, Mike is such a fan. All he talks about is Yana all the time. It's just terrific. It's great. All the time. All he says all the time is, Yana wouldn't have done that. I'm sure Yana would have said that. Nothing wrong with that. As long as your wife doesn't find out, I can work out quite well. The chomp, chomp, chomp of little teeth is moving closer to Perth. The locusts that have been devouring Western Australia are now only 20 kilometres. Someone's going to ask, are they grasshoppers or locusts? Well, whatever. I remember driving on one of my little country trips through, the bloke at the service station said, oh, I wouldn't drive down that way, the grasshoppers are coming. And I thought, I ignore most of these things, so I roared off in my car, and I suddenly noticed it was getting very dark. very dark, and I thought, oh, shit. And also things were hitting the windscreen. I thought, oh, what should I do? So I kept going. And the big trouble is, of course, is they get stuck in your radiator, you see, and then the radiator doesn't get the air, and it overheats, you see, so I stopped. I was no fool, I stopped. I don't know where I stopped, I just stopped. And I spent the next 3 days poking all these little locusts out of the car. Yes, it's not much joy, and it's rough for the poor farmers, isn't it? Not much fun for the locusts either. I mean, how would you ever find your life's buddy if they got lost in that crowd? Yana, where are you? Yana. Sorry. Luck is a relative thing. Some people are lucky when they win the lottery, other people are lucky to be alive. A young farmhand is one of the second kind. He has been found alive after being trapped for several days in an empty... We don't know why she was looking in the silo. I mean, we don't know how the key thing how he was... In fact, Neil Diamond wrote a song about that, didn't he? Silo, silo, silo. He's lucky to be alive, yes. Well done, sir. Now, don't forget to have a shave for Christmas. But why was the woman looking in the silo? Well, there's a woman looking in the silo, isn't she? Unless she lives there. Last one out, pull up the ladder. I don't know. See, we tend to leave things off, don't we? And if I get confused, how the hell do you feel? The bigger they are, the humbler they fall. The Soviet Union is reduced to accepting food gifts from Germany as Moscow struggles to get its economy in order. Ironically, the food is mostly coming from reserves the Germans have always kept in stock in case of a repeat of the and smut after the break, so you've been warned. Madonna and her naughty new videotape, and the 30s blonde bombshell who was the bad girl of her. We've apparently found out what happened. The bloke that was cleaning out the silos, it was a solo job. That was the bloke that fell off the end of the rope. He was cleaning out the silos, and as the story indicated, the owner was off somewhere else. Now, the owner expected to talk to the bloke, what was cleaning in the silo, rang a number of times the homestead where the bloke would be, got no response. Then the bloke, the owner of the silos and the employer, rang his sister, who was 80 kilometres odd from the place, and said, would you check? The last thing he was doing was cleaning the silos. So she checked, agreed, went up the ladder, and looked at that. Do they have that in the current affair tonight, do they? Don't you have all the scripts at home? Don't you go through them on the weekend? It's lovely to see. And now running through the main news again, former Queensland Government Minister Brian Austin was denied jail for 15 months after being found guilty of 25 charges of misappropriating ministerial expenses. An inquiry into the collapse of Rothwell's Merchant Bank in Perth has led to a further 40 charges against Chief Executive Laurie Connell. In finance news, the Australian stock market today had its big... Madonna won't be happy until she's arrested and thrown in jail. She can't stop being naughty. Not that she's terribly attractive, is she? And she doesn't mind if the rest of the world watches while she's at it. The American MTV show, what a copycat they are. They have banned Madonna's latest videotape, and the only way fans of the US will get a peek is to buy it on the home video. Now, the ban in America hasn't worried courageous Richard Wilkins, K-Tick. He'll be showing the full Madonna videotape in MTV tonight on Australian MTV. So get your little videotape machines ready for those lonely nights. Well, in a way, every age has had a girl like Madonna. Back in the 30s, it was Ina Ray Hutton, known as the blonde bombshell of rhythm, with her all-girl band. She was a tap dancer and a one-time member of the Ziegfeld Follies before she took up the baton, which was her trademark. Now, here's a taste of something shocking. This show's going on till show. What a silly expression. It's not a show, it's really a news program. We'll be continuing for another couple of weeks. He said, look at his watch. Oh, I've got one of these silly watches from 11 o'clock. Can you get a close-up? See the date on the right-hand side. Now try and read the date. Can you get that? Probably can't. See? See there, it's gone between the two. So when I look at the date when this program's on, I don't know what day it is, which of course supports what a lot of critics say. So, what is it?
Halfway to tomorrow.
Halfway to the Anyway, it'll be on for another couple of weeks, till about the 14th or something, middle of December. It's a good idea. The party was nice a couple of nights ago. We still see them sleeping around outside there in the car park, blowing bubbles. Of course, they didn't invite us in, did they? Oh, no, I did. I went. I saw Yana. And then she saw me and ran away. My charm was working again. Yes. I saw a nice drunk executive said, "You remember me?" I said, "Yes, I remember you when you were sober. That's a collector's item." He said, "Why don't you off and do your programs?" "Thank you," I said. The difference is I am sober and I'll always remember that. The prognostic chart, the way things will be tomorrow, roughly at 11 o'clock Eastern summertime. There's a bit of a trough over central Australia and just in the bight there. That's going to produce some effect. Indeed, when you see an L around summertime, you're fairly safe if it's inland that it's going to produce some thunderstorms and showers. That's the case up around Port. And of course, the little multi-legged creatures are heading their way to Perth at this moment. Poor little farmers, they have a rough time. Well, it's going to be a good weekend in part. Now, if you're going to the beach in droves or wherever you go, remember little kids' skin, their skin is very tender. Remember also when you put the 15 plus stuff on, it's exciting doing it, I know, but only lasts about 10 to 15 minutes in the sun. Wear a hat, even if they look silly, and don't wear those ugly shorts if you're a woman. I'll be back on Monday. Good night. Poland. Do you know how many kids he's got now? Have a guess. Have a guess. 9. 9 children. According to a newspaper whose pronunciation has not been forwarded to me, it says the Solidarność headquarters has been abuzz with more than word of Wence's landslide victory. They said his wife is in the 3rd month of pregnancy, although she's not sure yet. It's 9 children. That's a bit excessive, isn't it? Meanwhile, nothing to do with that. Oh, I must tell you about this. This is just lovely. A blind clergyman in Delaware can return to the pulpit after a 10-week absence now that he's won permission to have his guide dog in church. I think it's lovely. A little dog there, nudging him after 10 minutes. That's enough. Actually, I'm going to tell you something about a guide dog. I had to phrase this now. Don't ring up and complain. You know how dogs, when they stand near anything that's stationary for a while, take advantage of the situation? I was talking to someone during the week. I saw a man with a guide dog. They call them blind dogs, but it's silly. If you were blind, you wouldn't have a blind dog, would you? It's like taking Coles to Newcastle, or Woolies if it comes to that. Anyway, I said to the bloke, if the dog ever, would it do it on its master? He said, no, never. Just on cue. Any port in a storm. I said, well, perhaps the dogs start doing it when it's raining so that the owner doesn't know, you know, sort of break them in. Here's a point. You understand, the dog did it on the owner, right? On his leg. And he didn't know, because he's blind. I think the dog was blind. Perhaps that's the problem. All right, ring up and complain. Go on, our phones are open now, waiting for your call. Actually, we're not, but we say that. Support for the Hawke Labor government remains at a record low, according to the latest Morgan Gallup poll, published in this week's Bulletin magazine. The poll of X number of voters, an odd number in fact, 3,669, found support for the ALP steady on 32%. However, Mr Hawke's personal popularity, this is before the recent coup, increased 3 percentage points to 36%, with 55% disapproving and 9% undecided. There you are. So he's not doing terribly well at the moment, but as you'd say, it doesn't matter, it's not an election time. However, on the subject of politicians, former Queensland Cabinet Minister Russ Hinds does not look a well man, and it's been suggested in court, as we mentioned last night, that he won't be with us much longer. Mr Hinds today spoke with Channel 9 reporter Spencer Jolly about the allegations he's facing about corruption. Mr Hinds said he had always been...
Never see it again.
Mr Russ Hinds. Well, I didn't have many toys when I was a child. My father was rather tight-fisted when it came to fun and money. I only knew what they looked like from observing other children who took their toys to school for show and tell. I made do with a matchbox car with one wheel. But I recognise some of the old favourites of my younger days. In a new line of toys that say really rude things, shouldn't we? For older adults, it'd be great, wouldn't it? What chance that little girl's got? I suppose it makes Mum feel better if the kid copies her. There you go. Didn't have any... I think I had to save up. I did get a double-decker bus in 1955, a red one. I remember I had to put on labour. It was 1911 pence. And I used to find bottles and things, and in those days you could take bottles back and get the money back on them, you see. I'd wash them out. I was very clean in that respect. And I remember we did actually find a shop that used to stack the bottles at the back of the shop. And I thought, oh, there's a lot of bottles, so we took them around the front and said, we've got all these bottles. We unfortunately had them in the crate he'd had them in. He said, yes, they're mine. Oh, just helping. I wouldn't mean he was a criminal. I'd be no good in politics. TV cartoons, and more particularly TV cartoon music themes, are pretty low on the totem pole of art. To many, they epitomise the ephemeral nature of television. Ephemeral means the passing nature of television, which is rather appropriate at this juncture. But now there's a newly released album called Fantastic TV Tunes. Well, that gathers together the themes of all those disgusting shows that only children can love. Because we didn't have television when we... Did I mention that? We didn't have television. I bought a pair of plastic binoculars and used to watch the neighbours one. Never heard what was happening, but I knew all about Paladin. I used to give little subtitles. He's coming, oh. It's a pathetic childhood. In fact, my adulthood hasn't been much better. Anyway, the programs like Magilla Gorilla, Yogi Bear, Prince Planet, The Jetsons, The Archies, Banana Splits, Flintstones, etc. Now here's a tribute to the stuff of our youth, the fantastic cartoon. Now the main news again. Prime Minister Hawke today said he'd not only see out this term in office, but another term as well. Mr Hawke also admitted he'd been hurt by comments by Treasurer Keating about his leadership abilities, but has accepted the apology offered. In finance news, the Australian stock market closed weaker today in Tokyo. The Space Shuttle Columbia was a pretty sight as it landed safely just a few hours ago after a voyage troubled by computer failures and clogged plumbing. Isn't it amazing, isn't it? Wonderful. Wonderful. Which way would it go? Clockwise or anti-clockwise? Do you people know? It went round in a straight line. Is that what you're saying? I suppose it did, yes. Absolutely admit it did. Straight line. Kept going, straight out into space. A safe landing of a different kind has been made by one of the more outlandish space cookies of our time, David, what sex am I? This week, Bowie. Entries closed last Friday, a mail at 5 o'clock. It was touch and go there for a long time, deciding whether Mr. Bowie was one of us or from some other place. These days he seems fairly normal, after almost two decades of a rock and roll career that spans several different identities, including a sheep. He even has a best of album now being released, which includes this old space war. Themes were just little kiddies at heart. The forecast temperatures for you tomorrow. Scrap metal, which is not a bad idea, is it, really? That's the show for tonight. Miss Rivers was quite charming. Little thing, only about that size. Little thing. I'd seen her before. I thought she was, that size. That size. Size is not important. Not when you're a lady. I'll be back tomorrow. Who are we on tomorrow? Who's on tomorrow? Who's the... Glenn Shorrock. Glenn Shorrock, yeah. And who's the guest tomorrow?
Clive Robertson.
I wonder how many chickens Sergei can fit in his overcoat. Coming up after this break, looking back through the golden years of television. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but the fun does seem to be going out of many things which once gave me pleasure. Take television, for instance. A lot of the programs these days seem to lack something. What? Well, maybe it's originality. It's almost as though they're being turned out by some sort of factory on their production line. Well, I'm not alone in this feeling. There's another chap who remembers the golden years of television and even had his own show with that name, David Lyle. Well, do you think, are we just getting older, or was television somewhat better when you and I were kids?
Well, we're certainly getting, we're undeniably getting older. There were some aspects of television that certainly were better, but one of the things you've really got to watch out for is the nostalgia factor. Nostalgia is a terrible old muddler. Sometimes I think some of the programs that we remember so fondly, we're remembering the time that we saw them, what we were doing. You know, we were sitting there in our little onka-paringa dressing gowns, having milk arrowroot and that sort of thing. One in particular that I remember as being a wonderful sort of adventure show was the Cisco Kid. But when you look back at it, it perhaps wasn't as exciting and was rather bizarre. I've in fact got a clip of it. I've done the perfect thing for the Cisco Kid. I've reduced one episode.
Goodbye, amigos. See you soon.
He's such a village-iddy sidekick though, wasn't he?
Pancho, in fact, was very old when he made that. Pancho was born in 1889 or something. The Carrillos, he was Leo Carrillo, they were a very rich old Spanish Californian family. In fact, just north of Los Angeles, there is the Carrillo National Park, which was some of his family's homeland. But when he made that, he was something 72 or something. They used to lower him on the horse with a huge sort of block and tackle device. They used to have to put him on the horse. And so he died a bit. But of course, Cisco himself, Duncan Ronaldo, came out to Australia. And by the time that he was finally brought out here, he himself was in his late 60s and not too well. When he arrived at the airport, they thought, oh, we'll get a horse and he'll sort of rear up and everything. He hadn't been on a horse for years. They put him on the horse. He was thrown off the horse and was so upset about the whole state of affairs that he wet his pants. So he wasn't at all the hero we'd imagined. He was a dampened hero by the time we kids got to see him. That's a case in point, I think, where you find that your memories of the show have been clouded. It really was pretty bizarre. They used to ride round and round the same rocks. You got to know the rocks.
So would you say that's why we're not actually seeing the Cisco Kid on television now? So
yes, I think,
contributing factor.
I think probably the best thing that you could say for the Cisco Kid is that we should remember it fondly.
In the past.
In the past, yes. I think that's the best.
All right, so try to separate, I suppose, would you not say the test of whether it merely is nostalgia, something you and I remember, is if it works today with a new generation?
Well, as we saw with the Addams Family, for instance, that was something that people had seen at the time and thought, oh, that was a fun show. And then if you watched it again as adults, you realised there was a whole lot of other stuff going on that you'd missed as kids, that Gomez and Morticia really had the only passionate romance of the time, although I must say Peter Gunn was the other one. Peter Gunn, if you remember, had his Edie, who used to sing at Mother's, and they were not married, but clearly having a rip-roaring hold the phone affair.
But I found him so boring. Who was that character in Peter?
Craig Stevens.
He had something very bland about him.
Well,
like Mannix, you know that.
Oh, Mannix was really boring. No, Craig Stevens was sort of buttoned down college cut, but so buttoned down that he was very clipped and so forth.
One show I liked, and I hope it isn't just nostalgia, although I haven't seen it on television recently, was Patrick McGowan, because I do a Patrick McGowan impression. I won't do it now. In Danger Man. That was terrific. It was exciting.
Oh, no, Danger Man really was something. I agree there that he was quite a hero. He made Danger Man first, and then because it was so successful, he got permission to then make The Prisoner, one of the great cult programs, because no one's quite sure what it means. But when you think about it, that's pretty attractive, I think, that you could make a program, get the money to make a program that was mysterious and mystifying, and that wasn't straightforward. Danger Man was more straightforward, but he was such a presence, so I think he was an electric sort of presence. I have a clip of him in a typical, this is an early Danger Man. Again, the sets are cheap, it's shot in black and white, it's old, but there's something about him that I think really commands your attention. So have a look at this clip.
I was in Rome when I was summoned by the frightened executive of the bank. He was in no way distressed by the death of his president. Only unbalanced accounts could distress Mr. Finch. The man had ink in his veins.
Interesting, Mr. Finch, but I'm on holiday here. You're lucky to find me in Rome. You surely, just a moment, please, you surely didn't drag me all the way up here just to look into a murder, did you?
No, there's something much bigger involved.
All right, what is bigger than murder, Mr. Finch?
Delroy was directly responsible for a large reserve of gold being held in Rome as part of our NATO contribution. $5 million worth. That gold is now missing, Mr. Drake.
A respectable banker for 25 years, then he suddenly embezzles $5 million, and he never even had a chance to spend it, did he, Mr. Finch?
That gold must be recovered, Mr. Drake.
Wonder what made him do it. You know, that amount of gold, Mr. Finch, must weigh over a ton. How did he get it out?
Well, he was president of the bank. It's our guess that he took it over a period of time.
Over a period of time. Thank you, Mr. Finch. Very interesting.
Gee, I'd like to see that. That's still good magic. I like that.
Yes, he goes at the rate of knots. Very interesting. Well, part of the reason that they loved him was because that accent was thought to be properly transatlantic. You weren't too sure if he was American or English or Irish or what. In fact, he'd been a bit of everything. He'd been born in Ireland, I think, then gone to New York. His parents went to New York. He lived in New York. They didn't like it. He came back to England, joined the seminary, studied to be a priest for a while, then left that, and then started to be an actor, then became a drunk, then sobered up. A fascinating life.
Do you think we'll see that again, though, The Danger Man? I would like to see it.
I'd like to think we might see it again. It used to be very popular at a time that you'd be well aware of, 5:30 in the morning, just about the time you're going to bed.
All right, we should look now, before we go, there's no conclusion, of course, to all this. We're merely just enjoying the past just a little since it's at the end of the year. What about the things that were slotted between the programs?
The ads. Yes, they, in fact, in many ways, the ads represent the era far better than the TV programs. The people who did make the programs felt, or hoped, I think, that they would have a life, whereas the people who made the commercials felt, well, this is for now. And they represent the values of the time a lot, sometimes embarrassingly so, that you realise that there were different values in the 60s to the ones we have now. And in fact, women were portrayed differently, and women's roles were portrayed differently, and women's... Have a look at this ad.
You know, one thing about being a Caltex service station operator, the nicest things happen to you. I was giving the usual Caltex service to my customers the other day when who should drive up but Sabrina. I recognized her at once, and she recognized me too, and asked me were the Marfac TV demonstrations I do real. I straight away invited her into the office so she could actually watch one being done. Actually, Sabby, I was just heating this fry pan prior to cooking a hot lunch. And if I just get a couple of samples of grease, then you can do a test for us yourself and prove beyond any doubt that Marfac, under extreme heat conditions, will stand up to it much better than any other grease. My, this fry pan really is hot. Had it turned right up.
My goodness, it really is hot.
About 180 degrees, I'd say. That dark one on the left is Marfac. The other is a conventional chassis grease.
Gee, look, the other one's beginning to go already.
The Marfac hasn't even budged. Can you believe your own eyes?
Can't deny it. That conventional grease looks real burned up.
There, you see, the conventional grease has just about had it, and the Marfac is still in perfect condition. That's what you call a fair dinkum Caltex product, Sabby.
Fair dinkum? Now you're really talking Australian. What do you mean when you say that Caltex products are fair dinkum?
Well, I don't think I have to explain fair dinkum to many of our viewers, but for your benefit, Sabby, fair dinkum products mean honest-to-goodness, super quality, stick-on-the-job Caltex products. The sort of products you want to use in your car.
Then it's Caltex for me.
Oh, how embarrassing for the woman. How embarrassing. I mean, imagine that woman trying to sleep at night nowadays. Is she still around?
Yes, she is still around. And in fact, I've been hoping to get an interview with her to find out. I mean, it was a terrible, bizarre existence to have, to be famous only for having this strange shape, which was not only the fact that she had a 41-inch bust, but an 18-inch waist, and the juxtaposition of the two meant that that was her fame. She didn't sing, dance, act, or you can certainly see she didn't act in that commercial.
She just appeared.
But all she could do, she had an unerring way, a bit like the compass needle finding north. She could always find profile.
Well, could I just finish, and this is quite serious. I mean, do you think that television is going to get better? Is it going to go back to the past and redo those marvellous things, or is that just part of our television's past and our past? It will never happen again.
Yes, it certainly, in the early days, people took more chances. I mean, and there were some brilliant sort of innovative shows that have been copied, the first Doctor shows, the first Westerns, the first detective shows. Some of those, they were sort of discovering what they could do, and things like The Fugitive that didn't fit any thing like that. There is a process now where there are big dollars to be risked and big dollars to be made, and so there's this middle ground. Let's make it safe. Let's make sure we've got the smart 16-year-old to appeal to this group and that group and the other group. And once you make them to a formula like that, let's have a go.
Yeah, they've overanalyzed it to death. Yes, and also there's a mini-series, of course, which absorbs a lot of money. They would have been worth the price of many mini-series. Nice to see you, Mr. Lai. Have a nice Christmas.
Same to you.
And I love the tie. You ignore what they say. Really. Isn't that just... we shall now think of that ad all evening. You know? The sad thing is that men will look at that sort of thing, and some blokes like it. I mean, she can't help it, but I think she'd wear a marquee or a tent or something, wouldn't you? The Big Bang theory behind American planning for war with Iraq is hit them hard and fast with big air attacks designed to destroy and demoralize. Well, after a week or so of that, it will be time for the foot soldiers to earn their beans and bully beef. This is where the going might get tougher for the Americans and their fighting allies. Tonight, in the concluding part of a special report on what the war might be like, American war experts and commentators look at the fighting on the ground. One important assumption in this equation is that the US already... It's difficult to know whether it's one of the things we'll laugh at in 25 or 30 years, or whether we'll cry about. That's the American, or one set of Americans' idea of what could happen if it happens. By the way, Mr. Hussein has decided that the meeting, the grand meeting, should be on January the 13th. The Americans are saying that's too close to January the 15th, which is the last chance you have. So we're still to hear what is to happen there. Meanwhile, we hear there might be some medium which will act between the Americans and the rest of the world and Hussein, and we're still to hear about that. Meanwhile, it's getting close to January the 15th. Still to come tonight, on a lighter note, almost a pun there, Christmas. It's always the kids, isn't it? Well, Christmas hasn't exactly crept on us this year. In fact, it's been Christmas in the shops and department stores since about mid-September. Well, now the festive season is really here, Santa will be down the chimney almost any minute. To put us in the right frame of mind, we thought we'd call on our occasional woodwind-er, Jane Rutter, to blow us a carol. Here's her version of God Rest. Not surprisingly, it'll be warm and somewhat hot. Warm and somewhat, I meant fine and hot. I suppose you'd have to go through warm to get to hot, so I was just being sort of precise. And 37 degrees. And I'll find out about those little showers that are going to, what are they, meteorite showers? What did I call them? Goodness. Yeah, meteor shower on the east coast. It's going to happen early Saturday morning. You might like to go and have a look at that through your binoculars and what else you might see at the same time. That's Thursday night's program. I shall be back on Friday night for the end of our year. They've got the most boring honours out. This is overseas. Real estate developer and former billionaire Donald Trump has been tagged the most boring celebrity of the year. Close behind was, guess, Madonna. Terrific. That's one for the workers. The world's worst role model for a generation of wannabes. What's a wannabe? Have you heard that?
Want to be.
Oh, I want to be like Madonna. As soon as I have the operation. Third place also went to rockers with the rap group 2 Live Crew, dubbed Too Lewd, Too Crude, Too Rude. More rockers on the list included Irish singer, how do you pronounce it? S-I-N-E-A-D. That's the one who's, she's in The King and I, isn't she? In some, yeah. And the New Kids on the Block, Teenage Mutant Singers. Appropriately, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles also made the list. Rounding out the winner's circle were US comedians Andrew Dice Clay and Roseanne Barr. Yeah, she's been a bit off recently, especially that bit she did in front of everyone at the big game. She was game. Former Yankee owner George Steinbrenner and actor Warren Beatty. I'm surprised he made it, I suppose, because that's what happens when you hang around with Madonna. I mean, someone said, have you seen her new rude clip? I said, why bother? Now, some people have rung up. I don't know why I ever bother to tell you anything, really. I mean, you ring up and say, what is it? We can't have a special news service that we ring you each night. You have to pay attention. Re the meteors. I'm going to say it once, and that's all. Right. Tonight there'll be a big meteor shower. Right, so put your shower cap on and go outside with your binoculars, point them roughly north-northwest between midnight and 3 or midnight and dawn. You'll see lots of them, little streaks going across the sky. It's called the Geminids shower. It comes from the constellation of Gemini, which may or may not be below the horizon. That's between midnight and about 4:30, anywhere in Australia, roughly north-northwest. Right, you know how to find north? That's how you find north. That's it. Have I covered that fairly clearly? Do you understand, do you? I'm going to miss you, you know. Have I cleared that? Is that clear enough? We should have a big... This is okay now? We've cleared it all up? I suppose some of the people have their compasses out, but the metal plate on their head will deflect the little needle underneath. Now the finance report with no further word. Romanians are finding out the hard way that freedom's not as much fun as they thought it would be. The bad old days are looking better all the time, at least under the ruthless, heartless dictator of Ceausescu. There was food on the... He drew breath after the breakup of the Beatles, now 20 years ago. He gets tired of... In fact, I was reading a little interview this morning in one of my hi-fi magazines. He's getting rather weary of being asked about will the remaining Beatles get together. He's been a clever little mop top, and to his credit, he hasn't been afraid to keep pushing himself with rather strenuous concert tours. Now, McCartney, who is 48, has been named the top live rock and roll performer of the year. During his 10-month world tour, McCartney broke the world record for a single crowd at a concert, 184,000 in Rio de Janeiro, beating Frank Sinatra's mark of 170,000. McCartney's concerts attracted bigger crowds than the Rolling Stones tour and left Madonna for dead. Is that what's wrong with that? Sorry? Left Madonna for dead in 12th place. And why does she wear those funny pointed bras on the outside, is it? She can't, because it's funny. I know it's all subjective, but she's not wonderful. Here's a touch of... I bet he toilet trained, I was to expect him to speak English. But what's that Tina Turner? I mean, she really should. I mean, she's an old woman. She shouldn't go around like that. Has anyone told her recently? Ring up and be rude to me. This is our last program for the year. The last program of the year. Could be my last program ever, you know. What's the old line is never take holidays, and there's some truth in that. I just thought I'd mention that. So if you can't stand me, well then you might have a fair respite. And if you happen to like this news program, well, who knows what next year will bring. Adelaide artist Geoffrey Proud has taken out this year's Archibald Prize with his portrait of playwright Dorothy Hewitt. I think actually Geoffrey Proud could sue the Nine Network. I'll tell you why. The word used by Mark Burrows was it's the prestigious award. Did he not say that? Yes, right. The word prestigious here says a practice juggling or legerdemain. I think that's how it's pronounced. Cheating, deceptive. So I apologise to Geoffrey Proud. We didn't mean that at all. We meant that it was involved with something which has prestige. The word prestigious doesn't actually exist. Good I cleared that up, isn't it? I've saved this a lot of money, you see. Anyway, we should have had the picture in here, really, of course. We shouldn't just be talking about these things. I'm going to miss you people, you know, and your personal habits. I suppose we should do the weather now, shouldn't we? Right. This is the prognostic chart, the way things will appear at about... Because 8 isn't terribly cool. Ask an Eskimo. Adelaide, fine, 12 to 26. I don't know why the Weather Bureau gives us things like warm and cool. It's subjective. Darwin, late storm, 27 to 34. Perth, fine. Maximum of 27. Alice Springs, fine, 15 to 34. Albany, slight drizzle, and early tomorrow. Overnight and early tomorrow, 14 to 23. Geraldton, fine, 17 to 27. And Broome, fine. And a maximum of 37 degrees. And that's the program for tonight, and indeed for the year. Thank you for watching. We've endeavoured to present the news, the latest news, of course. And if you're an observer of news, you'll find that often the things you see on this program are shown as the latest news the next evening, a little earlier. But you and I know better. We'll have a pleasant festive season. Be tolerant of the loonies on the road who drink too much. And if you drink, please just order a taxi. It might take a little while longer. And wear your seatbelt. And look after the kids. And send any spare change to me. Because who knows what will happen next year. Good night. We've got some real tarts in here tonight. No, and I don't mean MTV supporters. I mean real tarts tonight. So I'll tell you how to make tarts tonight. Had a great day today. Really most enjoyable day. I was even happy to come to work. Even when David Lyle, executive producer of The World, was wandering around saying, you know, he walks around like that. It's just the way he's made. I could even cope with him today. So that could mean a failing, of course. And I asked him what he did, and that usually gets rid of him. He goes away thinking, oh, that's a bit personal. So I think we might get them to paint our office. I've got some paint at home and a brush and a roller and what have you, and I'll leave little instructions, and he can write rude words on the... It's great when you're painting a wall. You write rude words on it, really rude things, you know, bum and other things like that. And then when you paint it over before anyone watches, it's good self-expression. It's better than graffiti. So I promised him I'll bring in a brush for him tomorrow. So you see, executive producers are useful for something, providing you want something painted. Well, on our news program tonight, some of the bluster has gone out of the American troops in the Gulf. Suddenly the idea of a war is not quite so much fun. And also I'll be talking to Douglas Adams tonight, who wrote A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I'll talk to him about his new book. Well, we live in a sunburnt country, a land of sweeping flames. There are some big bushfires still burning. Things improve there very quickly, of course. Lovely part of the world. Hey, hello to the service station people in Hay, who I run into every holidays. There are always a few people eager to make a fast buck out of a calamity. Police are investigating widespread suspected insurance fraud in Newcastle, severely damaged lately. Great human nature, isn't it? Building. Hear that? Building. It's spreading. It started in Adelaide. It's going all around Australia. Building. Margaret Thatcher could be human after all. Although until we get the test back, we're not sure. She's been hurt by the outcome of the Conservative Party leadership challenge, which she won, but by a majority so small, she has to face a second ballot. Actually, I should mention the BBC, which is so terribly British. In fact, they owe me money. I was having a discussion with them this evening. In fact, the ABC owes me money and the BBC owes me money. The commercial people are all quite reasonable. It's just the government instrumentalities. Anyway, BBC Radio gave its government critics more ammunition when it mistakenly broadcast that Mrs. Thatcher had lost the Conservative Party leadership battle. Listeners to Radio 4, 6 o'clock news, were shocked to hear in a specially extended program on the leadership issue that as the winner, challenger Michael Heseltine would now go to Buckingham Palace for a formal meeting with a Queen. Well, some of those guards, they don't fool me in those uniforms. Program presenter James Naughty, who when he was very young was a little naughty, then apologised for the mistake and gave the real result of the ballot. A BBC spokesman who wouldn't be named, of course, said, "It wasn't a misunderstanding about the result, it was simply that the wrong tape was played. Now go away." Isn't it lovely they get that wrong? The worst example I remember in my radio days, indeed they're looking more rosy as the days go by, was when we played the obituary before the person died and they rang up and said, "I'm quite well, thank you." They have obituaries ready for people who look sickly. Some people who work for the station, they've had obituaries ready for years. Young ones too. And they played it accidentally. And he objected. I think when he did die, they didn't, so it was sort of averaged out somewhere. Well, coming up a little later in this program, intergalactic or... those Sinatra tapes, remember I said that we had, I've forgotten how many sets it is now. Was it 10, was it? 10, yeah. 10 million or 10 sets to give away. We're advising those who were fortunate enough to get them. We only had 10 sets. And we had some lovely little letters from people A few deaf people wrote in, which was a nice touch. I think it's about this program is that it sort of doesn't discriminate at all. On the subject of discrimination, is a phone call time? Is that reasonable, is it? We just shot the background here. A lady is rung and she says the pink and black hurts this lady's eyes and she wants to know if it can be changed. I don't think they actually can change eyes on that reason. I think really you can't just do that. But if you mean does the set should be changed, I don't know. I'm not terribly over the top as regards the set. I think the one that I worked in at another time had certain joy. But I'm sorry, madam, I don't know what you... Why don't you turn your set to black and white? It's not so silly. In fact, you see a lot more in black and white. Now, remember I mentioned there were 4 calls, and I got it so wrong. Remember I said last night about that 747, they put the wings up because the local council said that the hangars can only be that wide. That was the only way to get the planes in. Well, apparently I was misinformed there. We had 4 calls, at least. The wings on the 747 are bent up at the ends to increase fuel efficiency and increase wind flow. I feel so silly now, having said that. And so, thank you so much for ringing. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we were more, but we managed to get 4. Thank you so much. I won't say that again, will I? One call, a lady viewer thinks that the viewers of RWT, which is this program, aren't very bright. She watches each night. And she also doesn't like the way Clive often has jibes at the homosexual community. It's unfunny and unnecessary, and it gets boring when he does it so often. I don't at all. I do work in this business, madam. I can't discriminate. In fact, I send up overt heterosexuals more often. Lady said here there was no way that I was born in the 1960s. He's certainly older than in his 30s. It's the set, isn't it? The set that does that. It's the set. And this thing here, snakes made. I really can't show you that one, really. And, oh, this is the last one here. I made some comments about flares. Remember saying how silly flares were? Well, we had a sailor ring up. We're not sure from which hotel. He said, read the comments about those who would wear bell-bottom trousers. Now, I didn't say bell-bottom. I said flared, you see. Well, this gentleman is a sailor and has worn them for the past 18 years. I'm not for sure if he means sailors or whether he means bell-bottom trousers. And it's part of a sailor's uniform. Oh, really? And found my remarks about them degrading to sailors. I thought they liked that. He wants an apology made, and he ended up ringing twice. He goes, I'm sorry you rang. Right, we covered that. President George Bush is about to leave for the Gulf from Paris, where he has been attending a gathering of North American and European leaders. Mr. Bush has been beating the war drum at the meeting and is pleased that most of the... Alfred Dunbevan Butcher is the sort of name you might forget, but not anymore, not in Melbourne anyway. Dr. Dunbevan Butcher gave the city its magnificent butterfly house, and now the sanctuary has been named in his honour. Let us go a fluttering landing strip on his head for them, didn't he? A friend of mine had a lovely collection of butterflies. They're in a book, which is a bit messy, really. I said, is that the way to look at them? He said, oh, well, it goes around like this. Time for mince tart time. Uncle Bertie wrote me. I don't think he's particularly impressed with me at the moment. I think really if I'm going to take over the Robertson empire, I think perhaps I'm going to have to wait a couple of 100 years. Anyway, actually, secretary writes. I'm not sure about his relationship with his secretary. Neither was his wife, but that is another story. Uncle Bertie wrote to me and sent me the usual things, bits and pieces. However, now, the thing that, well, I haven't mentioned, apart from the fact that the marmalades are lovely all year time, and the fruit mince is terrific, in fact, these will last about 10 milliseconds when we go to another break, is how you make the actual pastry, because it is the complement, the 2 of them. I have made some notes here. Penny Farrell has been coming in, and she knows all about these things, and we sat down, man to man, and discussed this. So now, you can have the mince as is. You don't have to have it in the fridge, although I like them cold, but it doesn't have to be. Now, the pastry, I'm not a cook here. There is short crust pastry, short crust. You can buy in frozen sheets and bash the hell out of it with little shaped things, like these little things here, you know, these little cute eggs. He is no introduction. He is, in fact, the author of that popular book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But of course that is not primarily why he is here. That epic was of his past. He does many things and has just released a new book of terrestrial endeavours called... When the United States first started packing troops off to the Gulf 3 months ago, many soldiers strutted their bravado as though it was all going to be a bit of a turkey shoot. They were overbearing, overzealous and overconfident. Well, to be fair, it's hard to put old heads on young soldiers, but there are some older heads among the Americans' men who remember how some of their mates went to Vietnam and came home. Well, to help make the fighting go a bit smoother, if it comes to war, the Americans have popped a new spy satellite into orbit, say military analysts in the United States. NASA placed it in orbit with the help of the space shuttle Atlantis, but all did not go according to plan for the shuttle's return to Earth.
Yesterday, to a storm of a different kind, the Hubble telescope has sent back pictures of a massive disturbance in the atmosphere near Saturn. It could be the biggest storm cloud in history, 3 times larger.
First had it up on the screen and I showed it to some of my colleagues. They said, Westfall, you've been playing with Saturn pictures and Jupiter pictures. You have put rings around Jupiter. And that's not how it was, of course.
Rob Wallace, World Tonight.
I can't work it. Was that Saturn, was it, or the moon? I always get the 3 confused. Why is it going backwards and forwards all the time? In fact, I have this day decided I shall take some interest in astronomy. I'm going to get a telescope, I hope, soon. And I shall go out in the country where it is clear, perhaps out near Coonabarabran, where the big boys are, and assemble the whole thing, try not to get arrested. I often get interest in the police, you see, because when you're waiting for photographs, you often set up on the tripod, and the locals don't understand. They ring up the police come down, they see your camera on the tripod, and they say, what do you think you're doing? I say, well, I don't know, really, actually, I don't know. It's just this camera's on the tripod, I'm waiting for the light to be right. Oh, what's your name? And they go through this. So I dare say that if you see a little person assembling a big telescope just down the street from where you are, if you're out in the country, it'll be me. And I won't be looking in your window, because they don't focus that close. I've tried it already. They always know, don't they? Only in films do you see that. That's why videotapes are selling. Anyway, I'm going to take it. I have no idea what's out there. In fact, I have no idea what's 1 floor above here. Except Mr. Lyle, who goes around bumping into furniture, but he does it with class. Well, still to come tonight, Playing the Blues with Cephas. And now on the Will They Make It to the News from Taunton in England. Caring firemen saved a shoal of tropical fish when the tank that the fish lived in exploded during a blaze in a house there. Unfortunately, they threw them into a tank containing a piranha. That's the correct pronunciation. Piranha is a little thing on the end. See? Piranha. See that there? See the little thing? What do you call that? No, it is an accent. Anyway, the bloke, Richard Derrick, known to his mates as Dick, who owned the fish, said, the firemen were only trying to help and you've got to see the funny side of it. At least it was a change of diet for Percy. His name's Dick and he calls his fish Percy. Usually he eats steak and ham. There's one other one here that I'd like you to... I probably won't be able to find it because we've got a lot here tonight. I'll leave it for a little later if we have time. Slightly rude, we'll make it in the really adult section of this program. Well, now the real news, and just to remind you in case you've come back enjoying yourself this evening while I've been working hard. Now some of the main news again. One of several bushfires in southwestern New South Wales is burning on a 60-kilometre front. Stock losses are big and 2 volunteer firemen have been injured. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher is under pressure to step down after failing to score an outright win against Michael Heseltine, who challenged her for the Conservative Party leadership. And finally, the old saying is that cheats never prosper. Milli Vanilli have found out the hard way. Let's hope we never hear of them. No explanation as to why they look so silly, but that might come another time. But of course you realise if you have a Milli Vanilli disc, it's a collector's item now. Of course, you're not a very bright collector, but it is a collector's item. It might appear that we've not hear them again, or we might in fact, because a new album is to be released in January, evidently another faked product. But Mr. Pilatus, who was seduced by a big man with money, and Mr. Morvan, who just watched from a discreet distance, say they will have nothing to do with this promotion. Instead, they're starting up again as Rob and Fab. They'll be seduced by a knight on a white horse this time, won't they? Are they silly, aren't they? Oh, so silly. But still, we need silly people. It makes normal people like us look good, you see. It's all to do with contrast. It is funny how people who play the blues can make you feel anything but. John Cephas and Phil Wiggins are visiting us from Virginia, USA, with their own way of playing guitar and harmonica. You're in luck if you live in Sydney. They're playing this week, right through till Sunday night, at the Rose, Shamrock and Thistle in Roselle, Roselle and Roselle. But tonight they're playing Springs a late storm 24 to 39. Now, depending which bit of paper you read, Broome will have a late storm 24 to 39, or it'll be fine and 33, so somewhere, you know, above zero, above freezing. I mean, they give us both of them. What's it? This is Lotto, is it? Weather Lotto. And Albany, it will be generally cloudy, the chance of a morning shower, 11 to 17. And Geraldton, fine with an early fresh sea breeze, 10 to 26 degrees. There you go. Is that it? I was enjoying tonight. It's great. So I get a nice telescope, one that, you know, it's about 100 yards long, so you can see there's a Hasselblad on the moon, apparently. One of the naughty little astronauts left it there. It'd be good if I just pick it up, with the glint of it on there. And if it does work terrestrially, I don't see anything wrong with just letting it droop down a bit to horizontal level and just look at the construction of flats, you know, around the metropolitan area. I'll be back tomorrow, which she believed. Mr. Hawke said she was committed to strengthening the relationship between the United Kingdom and Australia, and she worked energetically to achieve that object. Be nice if he spoke English, wouldn't it? He said Mrs. Thatcher had made what must have been a very difficult decision, and he wished her well in her retirement from the Prime Ministership. I think it means that he gave a diplomatic response to her. Well, British opposition leader Labour's Neil Kinnock hasn't wasted any tears on Mrs. Thatcher. He's calling 11 years is not bad. I mean, what does the woman want? You know, 100 years? 11 years is not bad. She's done well. If being in power is doing well, has she done well for the community? Of course, no one will ever agree on that. And that information there, that little story came from ITN. They employed one of the directors that couldn't get a job here, I notice. Great shots. It was good. We sometimes think that they do things better than we do. Sometimes we're wrong, which shows we're not right all the time. Coming up a little later on tonight's program, the wonderful music of Australia's. About my tie, I've got to say, I'm wearing this for a sort of bet. This belongs to David Lyle, who used to work in television and now is an executive producer of something, and he wore it today to annoy someone else. So I said, could I borrow your tie? It's really quite off, isn't it? It really... Do we agree with that? Yes? No?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Not because it belongs to Mr. Lyle, but because it's silly in its own right.
Yes.
Right, okay. Is there some pill you should be taking about this hour, is there?
Yes.
Yeah. We have some great music tonight, hopefully with Michael Atherton. He's written a book about Australian produced instruments. He's always very good. Lovely bloke. That should be a little later, as soon as we get over Mrs. Thatcher. Well, no matter how often Australia catches a light, it's always sad to see the harm done to people's lives. The Riverina district of New South Wales.
Well tonight.
Not sure who the crew was, and I don't know how to phrase it. If I say that was well shot or well done, it sounds like we're, you know, being, what's the word? We're taking advantage of the suffering of the farmers, but it was well done. I don't know, my heart goes out to them. It must be terrible. The poor sheep. I mean, sheep are silly, but they don't deserve that. So, poor people of Hay, I'm sorry. And a series of bushfires in Queensland have burned through a tenth of the state. The fires are burning on 10 fronts in rough country, making it difficult. President Bush, armed with new pledges of international support in the Gulf, has declared with renewed vigour that Iraqi forces will be driven out of Kuwait. Mr. Bush is in Saudi Arabia to cheer up American soldiers by celebrating Thanksgiving Day with them. Mr. Bush's hair is growing darker. It must be that stage in his term that happens. A lot of talk is going on about that, isn't there? I suppose it's better to have talk than too much action. 2 more Australians killed in an air crash in Thailand last night have been named. They were 43-year-old David Paul and his wife Jay, 44. The Pauls were from New South Wales but lived in Hong Kong, where Mr. Paul was financial director of a group of... Prince Philip has told Cape York Aborigines he's sure they can coexist with the proposed space base. However, he's chastised the Queensland and federal governments for being tardy with the management. I like Prince Philip. He's a good bloke. He's quiet, isn't he? It's like Mr. Thatcher is very quiet, isn't he? Or else. Christmas is 6 weeks away, and the nice people of Brashers, who sell all sorts of marvellous things, have drawn my attention to a little unit they have for sale for you. Now, the great thing about it is remote. You could have this in your bedroom, put the wardrobe against the door to stop people, and you can have your own little remotely controlled one. I have a little device here which does everything. For example, let us look at the tape here. Here, press the button here. This marvellous music. This is Paris, Texas. Ry Cooder's music of about, how long was the film there? About 6 years ago? This thing has a thing, this FM radio, so we flicked a tuner. This is all done remotely.
I was manhandled. That's better. OPSM, the fitting way to buy...
So they go to ABC FM. Oh, they must be all out powdering themselves. Isn't it lovely? Mine hasn't even got this. I've got to get up and actually manually turn it round.
I see trees of green.
Oh, how beautiful. Isn't that... Oh, gorgeous. And as well as that, we have CD. And I must play you just a bit of this because it's my joy. See the little thing there? Now, if I got 12 there, now I go 10 and 2. No, I'm getting... no, oh dear. Oh, there you are, right. Right, hang about. It has a 5-year warranty. A 5-year warranty, which very few things have. And, the price, while we're trying to Perotti. You ready for it? Just relax. $999. I said to the man who came out, I said, why don't you make it $1,000? He said, $999 actually saves you $1. I said, oh, all right, it's a fair cop. So there you are. It's a 5-year warranty, remote control, CD player, dual cassette decks. It's the latest of it, the Yamaha mini hi-fi system at Brashers for that price. And Christmas is only 6 weeks. Pity the man who doesn't like music. Music is the complement to life. It must be great to actually make harmony, to feel your instrument vibrate in sympathy with others. That is another world and not one that is too overpopulated. Michael Atherton does a lot of things well. He plays a lot of instruments that were born eons ago, and he's written a book about them. Should I say, I think he should come back, for our sake, to show there's more in life than the golf and Mrs. Thatcher. I wonder what she's doing now. Probably belting her husband up, isn't she? If it weren't for you, if it weren't for bang. Oh. It's amazing what some people will pay for a piece of wood and some strips of catgut. A Stradivarius violin has sold in London for $2.3 million. What does that mean? Its absence from the market was a considerable help to the price. What does that mean? Do we have any idea what that means? Isn't it funny? You can actually read and hear things you don't understand in this part of life, isn't it? Its absence from the market was a considerable help to the price. I think we'll leave it a mystery. I think have answers for everything makes life a bit sort of boring. As we know, Christmas is a time for giving, for overeating, for family feuds or family foods. Have you seen Rob Bruff, have you? Now it appears that Christmas is a time for magazine editors to think along the same bizarre lines. Now take these 3 magazine covers for December. Now here's America's Vanity Fair with Roseanne rather large bar bearing herself. Right, make a mental picture of that. Our very own Cleo looking remarkably similar. Then Cosmopolitan, which at first sight looks like their lady couldn't find a man to flop on. However, if if you look inside. All I can say is poor old Santa Claus. I suppose there's only X number of things you can do with ladies in pictures, aren't there? Robert? Robert goes straight from here to his local chemist, hoping he's developed the negatives, which he dropped in this afternoon. Little face pressed up against the thing, looking for the chemist saying, I'm tired, leave me alone. It's Rob's birthday today, isn't it? Our audio man. He's, it's hard to tell how old he is. He's trying to grow a beard. He's as successful with his beard as I am with my little garden. And he's a lovely bloke, and it's his birthday today, which I'm sorry, Rob, because it just means you're going to grow older. I mean, that's really what it means. And all this jazz about being wiser and what, it just, I don't know who said it. I think it was Mr. Thatcher. Bill Irwin can't see the woods or the trees. He's blind, but that hasn't stopped him hiking with his dog through mountains and forests in America for the past 8 months. Isn't that quite remarkable? Was it 2,100 miles, was it? Whatever. Quite remarkable. I mean, I wouldn't bother, but you think you'd just sit at home and watch it on telly, wouldn't you? Well, coming up after this brief break is something we cannot resist showing you again. Pavarotti, Carreras and Domingo singing that. I really like that Dana Delaney for home. I really would. Then again, perhaps the relationship will only be at its best when I observe her from afar, when she's all made up and can use take 2 of her acting experience. Well, now just repeating the main news story of the night, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher has announced she'll not contest the second round of the leadership ballot and will resign as soon as a replacement is elected. I should tell you, nice to see a bit of class around, you know, at the soccer thing, putting aside the sporting bit, was it Italy somewhere? Whatever the grand soccer match this year. Pavarotti, Carreras and Domingo sang. And I have some information here, firstly from Decca and Polygram, same mob, that they have sold 3 million of this CD or LP in London. In Belgium, it's #1. I mean, this is the pop charts, mind you. #1. They don't pay this price, by the way. They probably get it for about 3pence. In Denmark, it's in the top 5. In Germany, 278,000. Holland is #1. Ireland still at #1. Italy is #3 in the charts. Hey, what's wrong, hey? Spain, still #1. Sweden, very close to gold, whatever that is. Switzerland in the top 10, #3 in the UK, even in America. So that's charming. So enough of my talking. Here they are with the encore of Mr. Carreras, Mr. Domingo, and the favourite of mine, Luciano Pavarotti. Pavarotti really does shine, doesn't he? I don't mean it's the heat, but he just got style. The other two are very brave to perform with it. Very brave. Oh, this is the cloud cover, the little shot from the satellite, unexpurgated, the way we get it. In fact, I've discovered now, you see all this, there's a line around here. Apparently, in the satellite itself is a little Japanese person who goes up for 6 months at a time, and he writes all this around here and then sends it back down to Earth, which I said, you're joking. We would have heard of it. He said, no, it's true. They start off doing lighthouse duty down the Antarctic, get used to being lonely, you see. And then, in fact, I think Mr. Thatcher's got that job next. She's got to blame someone. And that's the cloud coverage out of a few hours ago. But as I've mentioned before, ad nauseam, I'm sorry to do it, but it's important that you know, what you see is not necessarily what you get. It can be high cloud, it's not necessarily related to anything, except when there's no cloud at all, the chances are it's sunny. I know it's all vague, but that's what meteorology is all about, you see. So this is the prognostic chart. This is the way things will be in the next, and there are fronts going through. Now, they have left something off there, which is a trough running from that front to your right there, right across through the dip in that low there. However, we'll probably survive without seeing that. All right, the forecast for tomorrow then, which is Friday. And things don't really matter on Friday. There's a certain let it all hang out approach. Cairns will be mostly 18 to 32 degrees. That's because that trough is over it, so it was important, you see. Funny how you get caught out when they miss out on that. Sydney fine, 17 to 24. Canberra fine, at 33. That's for tomorrow. What was that note? Could you just hand it to me? Could we go soon because the chemist has finished my prints? All right then, okay. Good night. I don't know whether you're aware of this. I mean, there's so many weeks in the year. I mean, there aren't just 52. What did I do with it? There aren't just 52 weeks in the year, but there are lots of weeks, if you know what I mean. Like there's a media week, be kind to floor managers week, be unkind to floor managers week, wear a dress if you're a bloke week. This week has been Skin Cancer Awareness Week. You might have seen something of it in the media. Today is Aussie Hat Day, and what a marvellous little poster they have for Aussie Hat Day. This is wonderful. Look at them, all staring to one side there. Now, of course, when you have diminished hair, one has to wear a hat, and I wear this hat when I'm out in the country. They still know I'm from the city, though. Hats obviously keep the sun off both your face, the rim. I know it looks a bit weird in Australia to wear hats, and I feel a bit conscious wearing it even out in the country. But the country people get used to it because they're out in the sun a lot. And you should put a 15+ broad spectrum sunscreen. I sound like Ida Buttrose. It should also be applied to all exposed areas of the body, assuming you're doing normal things. It is only through the combined efforts of all groups that we'll beat the skin cancer epidemic in Australia, said a person called Mr. Faulkner. So there you are, you should wear a hat. There were, the early 50s, ladies wore hats a lot. I think men did as well, and we went out of fashion, which is silly. So especially going out in the sun. Do I look dapper on this, do I? I look like our executive producer, don't I? Nice, isn't it? Genuine Akubra. Right. That's really quite important. You talk to kids. I've worked out why kids go on the beach. Teenage kids go on the beach and get absolutely tanned. You can say to them, when you get to about 25, you look about 35 because your skin will dry out, or you'll get cancers. When you're in your teenage years, you never think you're going to get to 25 or 30. It's not going to happen. That's the thing one has to fight. But do, especially if you've got young babies, please look after the little creatures. Hopefully they'll be around when you're dead and gone. 3 months ago, it was touch and go whether young Ben Bray would survive a serious problem with his heart. But he did, with the help of a transplant, and today, he's got great eyebrows, hasn't he? They're just fabulous, aren't they? Good to see Ben. Gets a chance in this world. Something about the young, isn't there? I don't know what it is exactly. Perhaps they need the chance to live to be as old as we are and suffer as much as we. He'll probably get married and get divorced and all that sort of thing. Why should he miss out? There you are, Ben. Talk to me in 20 years. Today was the first day of the first cricket test between Australia and England. The back team, the Protectors. Pretty great show. Gosh, it's a stupid sport. I only put that on to remind you why I don't have it on often. It's so silly, isn't it? Really great sport team. When they hit the Protectors, do you hear on their little microphones there when the ball hits the Protectors? Yeah. Do they have little cameras in there, do they? They've got cameras in the stumps, haven't they? All 3 stumps? Or, there's no more than 1 stump. You have 3 each end. Even I know that. 1 camera in all 3 stumps.
Who's on first?
Who's on first? Now, is that only one end or both ends? Excuse me. Both ends. 1 camera in all 3 stumps on both ends. Right. But not in the Protectors. The Protectors? Not the Protectors. No one wants to go on holidays and get shot, stabbed, raped, or robbed by prostitutes, which is why tourists are shunning Rio de Janeiro this year. Many years ago, when I was in almost started, the early days of radio, the control op, as we used to call them in the technician in the old days, used to keep me company. I used to work shift work in those days, you won't believe it. Anyway, he used to be in the Merchant Navy, and I asked him which was the prettiest place in the world. He said Rio. That was 20-odd years ago. He said it was just terrific. How things change. Well, coming up after this break, one man's view of the events of the week with journalist and radio commentator Mark Day. Our planet hasn't had a peaceful past. It twisted and tormented itself with ice ages and fiery eruptions, long before mankind was even a twinkle in the eye of evolution. Sometimes we stumble on evidence of that past. An ancient jungle has been found where rocky mountains and snow now exist. Salinity of the place as well, couldn't it? Oh, to show the other hat I wear occasionally. You know, when you're in a traffic jam, this one works very well. Hello, hello, hello. I was going to be a copper, you know, at one stage. But the other days when you weren't allowed to wear spectacles, and the bloke said, he didn't even look up from the form, he said, "You wear spectacles, do you?" I said, "Yes." "You got Buckley's chance of getting in." I said, "Could you put me through to Mr. Buckley?" "Get out," was his unbroken thing. I would have been a corporal by now. I don't have corporals, do they? Sergeant. I'll be a sergeant by now, I can see that. I would have been so pedantic, no one would have liked me. Just like real life, isn't it? Evening all, that's right. Yes, yeah. Enough of that. Just move on, would you? Move on. I've got an ambulance hat as well, although you can't get, doesn't do much good, really. No one liked Mr. Lyle's tie that I borrowed last night. I don't blame you. I only borrowed it for a bet. I didn't say it was any good. This is my tie. This one was given to me about 20 years ago when I was a plumber's mate. Well, now, for a sad tale from Collingwood, one-legged Charlie has been kidnapped and his friends are missing him. Now the main news again, the Supreme Soviet has virtually given President Mikhail Gorbachev complete control of the government, conditional on his giving details on how he can use this power to stop the country sliding into economic and political chaos. There is a lot of money to be made in rumour mongering. We have a little item here. You know how each night I say it's either up because of this or down because of this. Well, one could feel that perhaps some people with a vested interest could make these rumours up and take advantage of it. For example, 3 things have had effect on the Gulf, the price of oil. A herd of combat camels is poised to attack US forces in the Gulf. This is true. A herd of combat camels. Saddam Hussein dreams of the Prophet Muhammad. An Iraqi astrologer will pick a propitious date for war. It says here, which of these rumours had the greatest effect on financial markets? The one in which the Iraqi leader dreamed of the Prophet Muhammad, who told him his rockets were pointed the wrong way, well, that helped to push the price of oil down by $6.77 Australian. The commando camels, that's the herd of camels poised to attack US forces in the Gulf, we're not sure which end was facing us. I put that bit in just to lighten it up here. Had less impact. They figured in a rumour that they were being loaded, they figured in a rumour that they were being loaded with explosives to serve as a first wave in an Iraqi assault on Saudi Arabia. What, the camels were being loaded with explosives and then go shoo to them? That's a bit strange, isn't it? The astrologer one, of course, or as the story went, was helping Saddam to decide on the best date for starting a war. Since Iraq invaded Kuwait on August the 2nd, war-related rumours have moved financial markets prices almost as much as the actual information. What were they going to do with the cows? Talk about the cows of Troy. Yeah, I don't believe most of that. The Soviet Union has sweeping wheat fields, vast paddocks of corn and enormous potato patches in its arsenal of food. But behind every grandiose agricultural scheme there also needs to be a system for getting the produce from the farms to the families who eventually eat it. In the Soviet Union that system is in disarray. Well, now the noble city of Leningrad is reduced to taking hand. Well, now to a bit of music. People have been queuing in the streets, then dancing in the aisles in London and New York at the Buddy Holly musical. It's going to be Australia's turn next. Buddy, the Buddy Holly story, will open on January the 5th at Her Majesty's Theatre in Sydney. To jolt a few pleasant memories for you and to show younger rock and roll fans just who started it all, here's the original and the best, Buddy Holly. Why has everyone else at this station got a company car and I haven't? They all roar by me, especially, you know. No, I'm talking about the people on camera here. I mean, I sound greedy, don't I? I want one because they've got one, but you think of a better reason than that? Talking to my good floor manager here, he and I used to live in Katoomba many years ago, and we're wondering how on earth, whatever happened to that Catalina? It was in Catalina Park at Katoomba. I remember it when I was a kid. very little. And I said to Mum, what's that? She said, it's a Catalina. I said, I know that. Do not tell me what that I didn't know. Cold, desolate place that was. What about the weather for tomorrow? Since it's Friday, I mean, really the week doesn't matter anymore, does it? The prognostic chart, the way things should be about 11 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow, it's pretty clear. I have got to be frank. Now, once again, they left the trough. This is the second day. Have we got some problem with our little graphics person? Have a look here. Have a look at that. Now, see, can you see anything to your advantage here? Do you see that little dotted line? Look, see here? Right, see, that's fairly clear. Now, this is the one the graphics person gets. Now, look at the map again. Are they filing them away for a rainy day? See what happens when you share cigarettes? I've mentioned it before, I'll say it again. Stupid people, aren't they? They have funny hair, don't they? They wear earrings and dresses. I think the women would, wouldn't they? Funny. A lot of loonies work in this business. Remember the fact they're illiterate, there'd be a lot of strange graffiti in the loos around this building. All right, we'll have a look at that again, the chart. The high-pressure system means that winds go in the anti-clockwise direction. As they go across the continent, you can see it's going to get fairly warm for Perth because the land is somewhat dry and warmer. It warms the air up. So Perth and indeed Carnarvon, all up that way, Geraldton. Up around Darwin, of course, that means the low tends to in summer mean both rain, the rainy season coming on, and also thunderstorms. There could be the odd coastal shower anywhere from about Adelaide round to, I suppose, Newcastle with the winds. Depends whether those winds decide to be showery or not. So the forecast for tomorrow, please take note. Cairns will be fine, range of 20 to 31. Townsville fine, 22 to 31. In Brisbane, mostly fine, 19 to 28. Sydney fine, 16 to 24. Canberra fine, 7 to 20. Melbourne, a shower or two, 10 to 19. Mostly fine in Hobart, 8 to 16. Adelaide fine, 12 to 21. Darwin, a late storm, 27 to 33. Perth fine, 18 to 35. Alice Springs fine and 17 to 35. Broome fine and 33. Albany will be fine, 8 to 23. Geraldton fine, 16 to 36. And Broome fine and 33 degrees. And don't forget your hat. I mean, it's hat day today. It's not meant to be once a year. It's meant to be for the whole year. Despite the funny poster. Excuse to put my hat on again. I think it suits me. I don't want to be a landowner. In fact, I wouldn't mind a few acres and grow a few trees, and have a draft horse, a little draft horse, that comes when I whistle. Let's hope I never lose my teeth. It'll be around me all the time, wouldn't it? Have a nice weekend. I shall return. We're on until about the 14th of December, so don't keep ringing. We're happy to be here, whether you like it or not. The news continues. I'll be back on Monday. Have a nice weekend. Good night. Last week I've heard of Phil Haldeman. He started in radio 37 years ago. I was going to say 370. As an office boy and panel operator at 2UE. He was a good guy in the 1960s on 2SM. Nowadays he's the voice that sells. He manages to cram more words in a minute than anyone else. Phil Haldeman has just put together a book which is highly amusing. Well, I only see him once every 10 years, so I thought it was time to make reparation. Studio, and of course, gee, I'd love to ring up my mates at the RBT. They could be lined up the street, wouldn't they? Anyway, having a look at the section here of parties. 331. Parties, actually, I'll look up 490. 490. A drunk staggered up to the hostess at a party. "Excuse me," he said, "do lemons have legs?" "Of course not," she replied. "I'm terribly sorry, then. I think I just squeezed your canary into my gin and tonic." We'll miss Robert, won't we, when he goes? 331, another one on parties. "Wow, what a mess my place was in after Saturday night's party. I got the vacuum cleaner out, it took one look and threw up." I like that. And even a funnier joke, you remember those group that gave back their awards because they were found to be miming? Well, 26-year-old Rob Pilatus, that was the ugly one, the one with the plaits, has been arrested in Los Angeles, charged with sexual battery of a 25-year-old woman. Now, he's been released on $10,000 bail. In the United States, you might not know the expression, sexual battery is basically tying someone up and sexually assaulting them, so it's not terribly funny. The arrest came after the pop duo, it's got Pop Dew here, D-U-E, were found not to have put their own voices on their Grammy-winning album. He's not really having a winning streak the last week or so, has he? Apart from the fact they still look silly. We haven't found out why they want to look that silly. Now, there have been suggestions that an argument between two unions over a radar system is causing unnecessary danger for hundreds of aircraft over Sydney.
While there's never been a serious mid-air collision in Australia, the Civil Aviation Authority is worried accidents like this may soon happen at a major airport.
Is that one of ours, is it? Is it? Amatil, don't they involve themselves with carcinogenic devices called cigarettes? Is that, would I be right there? Yes. Well, they used to. If not, I'd really think he shouldn't get it if it's related to cigarette purveying. Perhaps the company has changed over the years, but I seem to remember somewhere along the line they were involved with that. I don't think anyone involved with the purveying of cigarettes should get any award at all. They perhaps should be shot every now and then. Anyway, he's got till tomorrow, the 1990 Businessman of the Year. And then again, I apologise if you're no longer involved with it. I know you were working, Mr. Wills, you know, during your formative years for cigarette companies, but I imagine now you've realised how obscene it is that you would be involved with that and have given that up. However, if I'm wrong, you're still working for it. It was nice having the award for a day, wasn't it? I covered that fairly well, I think. Sure there'll be a card or letter about that, won't there? Now, there have been suggestions that the Victorian Public Transport Corporation is wasting more than $20 million a year paying a silent army of redundant workers. Wish I could get the job. The state opposition says the payments are not helpful to Victoria's taking an interest in astronomy after years and years of poo-pooing why do we look out there into our past. And I received a book today which gives you little programs to put into your computer, you see, which you've got to know your absolute latitude and longitude. Now, I wonder how one finds it. I suppose you could always borrow a yacht, stick it in your front yard and use the sat-nav and find out exactly where. But how does one do it? We never taught to do that at school. I assume with those, what, sextants, is it? I never went to sextant classes at school. I should have, of course. There are lots of girls there. But I wonder how one does it. Do locals know about it? I mean, do you have to do it to the, is it minutes and seconds, isn't it? Not hours, minutes and seconds, is it? And then milliseconds. A lamp's about to blow. I have that awful feeling. It happened to me once before, which explained my condition. It's all right, no, I'm Butch. I'm Butch. I don't know my latitude or longitude, but I'm Butch. And if you have an idea, perhaps you could ring me sometime. If you have any ideas, ring me. Well, the sea lions of California are having their revenge after being driven almost to extinction. There are now so many of them, they've got the locals blubbering. They seem to be enjoying themselves, don't they? They have my seal of approval. There'll be more after this. And now, so, we got someone rang in and said use a compass to find out your latitude and longitude. I would, except I stuck one in my finger once when I was at school. I think they should bring back not only a license for television, but an intelligence test as well. See whether, you know, how do you switch it on? Ooh, the hard ones first. Put the batteries in the infrared now. Oh. They both look the same. Yes. At least people don't live close to a chemist. And they have children all the time. As a friend of mine says, we never promised you fair, and how true that is. Well, now some of the main news again. Iraq has called for talks with US President Bush on the eve of a United Nations vote to authorise military force against Saddam Hussein. And John Major went to Buckingham Palace tonight to see the Queen and take his commission as Prime Minister. Painted, isn't he? There's a whole list of no promises, you know, from John Major. Now, in finance news there, it's good to know we no longer need drugs to enter a strange psychedelic world. It just takes a lot of money.
I'm going to grab that bag of gold and I'm going to take it with me.
Graphic designer Meredith Bricken is exploring a world she helped to create. She can move in here, even fly, and touch and manipulate objects.
I took the gold out of the chest, and it's now following my hand.
This looks like a picture, a cartoon, but it is also a place.
I'm definitely somewhere else.
A synthetic space made of graphics generated by computer. Scientists call it virtual reality.
When you look at a computer screen or a computer monitor, there's a glass barrier which separates you from the intelligence that's behind that machine. Well, with this new technology, we can actually break the glass and go into a world that the computer creates for us.
To enter that world, a person puts on a mask that contains three-dimensional video screens and a glove that registers finger movements. Both are attached to a computer. Adjusting the fingers controls a disembodied hand. Moving the head changes perspective. Users get the sensation of actually moving or flying inside a computer creation.
What we're doing with this technology is tricking human senses. We're convincing people that they're in a place that they aren't.
Fly down a little bit to the end of the room.
The new technology has that hundreds of people waited for hours at a recent computer show to spend just 1 minute in virtual reality.
It's like living in a cartoon. I like it a lot. I want one for my home.
You lose sense of being involved in the regular sensory world.
At $250,000 each, the reality machines are beyond the reach of most consumers. One California company is developing commercial applications, including games that could be played by people in different cities, connected to the same virtual world by telephone. Scientists envision cars and other products that could be designed and tested in virtual reality.
One of the things I'm most interested to look at is the position of the scapula.
Medical researchers at the University of Washington have built a virtual skeleton to visualize shoulders and other joints from the inside out.
I suspect there will be billion-dollar markets in games, in telecommunications, in science and medicine.
Its pioneers insist virtual reality could become as practical and affordable as television by the end of the century, but their explorations are beginning, and the reality of their work now is an exotic, expensive.
As a friend of mine says, we never promised you fair, and how true that is. Well, now some of the main news. Again, Iraq has called for talks with US President Bush on the eve of the United Nations vote to authorize military force against Saddam Hussein. And John Major went to Buckingham Palace tonight to see the Queen and take his commission as Prime Minister. But he's going to repaint it, isn't he? There's a whole list of no promises, you know, from John Major. Now, in finance news, there wasn't. It's good to know we no longer need drugs to enter a strange psychedelic world. It just takes a lot of money.
I'm going to grab that bag of gold and I'm going to take it with me.
Graphic designer Meredith Bricken is exploring a world she helped to create. She can move in here, even fly, and touch and manipulate objects.
I took the gold out of the chest, and it's now following my hand.
This looks like a picture, a cartoon, but it is also a place.
I'm definitely somewhere else.
A synthetic space made of graphics generated by computer. Scientists call it virtual reality.
When you look at a computer screen or a computer monitor, there's a glass barrier which separates you from the intelligence that's behind that machine. Well, with this new technology, we can actually break the glass and go into a world that the computer creates for us.
To enter that world, a person puts on a mask that contains three-dimensional video screens and a glove that registers finger movements. Both are attached to a computer. Adjusting the fingers controls a disembodied hand. Moving the head changes perspective. Users get the sensation of actually moving or flying inside a computer creation.
What we're doing with this technology is tricking human senses. We're convincing people that they're in a place that they aren't.
Fly down a little bit to the end of the room.
The new technology has created such a stir that hundreds of people waited for hours at a recent computer show to spend just 1 minute in virtual reality.
It's like living in a cartoon. I liked it a lot. I want one for my home.
You lose sense of being involved in the regular sensory world.
At $250,000 each, the reality machines are beyond the reach of most consumers.
One California company is developing commercial applications, including games that could be played by people in different cities, connected to the same virtual world by telephone. Scientists envision cars and other products that could be designed and tested in virtual reality.
One of the things I'm most interested to look at is the position of the scapula.
Medical researchers at the University of Washington have built a virtual skeleton to visualize shoulders and other joints from the inside out.
I suspect there will be billion-dollar markets in games, in telecommunications, in science and medicine.
Its pioneers insist virtual reality could become as practical and affordable as television by the end of the century, but their explorations are just beginning, and the reality of their work now is an exotic and expensive